2015 in order. Need a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a discussion of the potential zoning for Greenbush Driftway area, subject to Mass General Law, Chapter 40R, the Smart Growth Zoning Overlay District. What we've got, we're very fortunate, we have, let me make sure I get these titles right here. We got Bill Wright, who's the principal planner for Smart Growth Programs, Department of Housing and Community Development. Raise your hand, Bill. That's Bill. And then we got Matt Smith, who's the senior regional planner at MAPC. Raise your hand. We got a young lady in the middle, and I'm not sure.
Elaine Viner, I work with Bill on the 40R team at DHCD.
She's the assistant principal planner.
No, she's the
I'm the principal
planner of land use.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I thought we'd do is we'd come back up and have Bill give a little bit of an overview of 40R so that we're all on a common point. The planning board has put together a list of questions that I think would address a lot of the concerns that the public may have, so if we talk to those. At that point, then we would talk to Laura, because the process of handling 40R zoning is unique in terms of, or not unique, well, I guess unique is a good term, but it's different than the way we normally handle zoning within the town. And at that point, then Matt will come back up and talk to us as to why Greenbush. I think that'll cover, at least the initially, put us in good stead for the 8:30 portion of this, which is the public hearing. So having said that, I turn it over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity to come here this evening and talk a little bit about 40R. I'm going to stand here, if that's all right. Elaine, help me out with the slides. So, Chapter 40R, Smart Growth Zoning, is an incentive program for municipalities to encourage smart growth and housing production by basically offering some incentives, financial and otherwise, to encourage towns to adopt and implement overlay zoning districts that encourage, that meet essentially three basic criteria in terms of location, affordability, and as-of-right density. And you can see up here just quickly the as-of-right densities that have to be allowed are 8 units an acre for single family, 12 units an acre for 2 and 3 family, and 20 units an acre for multifamily. And this is allowable density. And the affordability is basic requirement is 20%, and I'll get into that a little more in detail. And the funding that's provided is essentially 3 types of payments. The zoning incentive payment for the initial adoption of the zoning ranges from $10,000 to $600,000 based on the size of the district. And we can talk about what that means as well. And $3,000 per unit for the density bonus payment. And a companion statute known as Chapter 40S, which is sort of a school cost insurance program. For any net increase in school costs attributable to school-age children living in the developments. I think everyone probably knows the eligible locations. In Greenbush area, it's obviously the TOD one, within a half mile of a transit station. Those numbers in red are a little outdated, but they're just sort of a snapshot of the distribution of the districts to date. As far as the affordability, so the minimum is 20% for each project that is 13 or more units in the 40R district. If you're doing age-restricted development, an age-restricted project has to be 25% affordable. If you want all of the units, people may be familiar with the rules for the subsidized housing inventory. If you want all of the rental units to count, like they would in a 40B, you have to do 25%. And so you have to put that essentially in your zoning, because if it's not in there, just sort of the basic 40R zoning, you won't get to count all those units. And also 20% for the district as a whole. So if you do exempt smaller projects from the affordability, you have to figure out a way to make up that affordability. So far, we've only had one municipality that's not applied the affordability across the board. And the affordable units, have to be spread proportionally throughout the development and across the different unit types and all that. The incentive payment's just a more detailed breakdown of, so those units on the left that you see, that when we talk about district size, these are the net new as-of-right units on what's classified as developable or underutilized land within the district. So developable is a vacant parcel that is available, and not like owned by the state or something, or in the case of the MBTA, a lot if there's evidence that it's for sale or has in the process of being sold. And underutilized land would be something that is sort of a marginal or declining use, and this would have to be documented, and where there's evidence that there's a market for redevelopment. So that's something to be mindful. Those are the parcels on which you apply the zoning, and whatever the delta is between what the existing zoning allows as of right, in terms of residential on those parcels, and what the new zoning would allow. Collectively, in the district, that unit makes up the thresholds on the left, and you can see the corresponding zoning incentive payment on the right. And then again, the $3,000 per unit, that's at the time that building permits are issued for a project. That's when the municipality is eligible for that payment. Again, these are payments to the town, not the developer. As far as the process is concerned, you guys have already sort of started it just by contacting us. We had a site visit just to sort of, look at the eligibility, which was pretty clear. Submitting an application, and after DHC receives the application, we have a certain amount of time to review it. We issue a letter of eligibility. At that point, the municipality goes forward and adopts the zoning, and this is typically overlay zoning. Once the zoning is adopted, or if the zoning is adopted, it has to go to the AG to get their approval. Then it comes back to us, and we just basically, make sure that what was adopted was what we had initially reviewed and determined was eligible. And then at that point, the municipality can, request the zoning incentive payment and begin to permit projects. Just quickly, the sort of distribution of, we have 35 districts, very soon to be 36, scattered, mostly, in eastern Mass, but some in western Mass as well.
Oh, sorry.
36 municipalities, 30, or will be 36, with 34 districts. And they range in size from as small as 15 units to over 1,000. We've got a couple of eligible at the moment. Swampscott is the one we're about to issue a letter of approval for that. And I didn't mention, but as far as, so far there's over 12,000 units have been zoned under 40R for as of right development and mixed use. And of that, roughly 2,700 are either built or in construction. Just to quickly run through some examples, I won't really talk much about these, you can just look at the slide. And that was in Belmont, very small one, an old church property. This is in Northampton, their Village Hill development at the old state hospital. And this is Linfield. This is a mixed-use one involving a lifestyle center and some adjacent residential development. And this is Reading, near their commuter rail station, their downtown, multi-district parcel. This is Easton, Queesit Commons, 280 units, and Natick, I think this might be the last one. This project is in construction. Sorry, I didn't mention that, but yeah, the last two are in construction. Natick and Easton. And that's it. I don't know if people have, I know you have questions because submitted them. I also wanted to just say that Elaine is here and we'll probably sort of tag team in terms of answering the questions. She's every bit as, and in some cases, more knowledgeable about 40R and zoning in general than I am. So.
Procedurally, I guess, is it easier to go through the questions that we had, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I think that may be, why don't we go ahead and do that? But before we do that, I see EDC's here. I didn't know if they wanted to say anything. I saw Mr. Harrison. I didn't know if he wanted to say
This is
anything.
Chris McConaughey. I'm the chairman of the EDC and 3 Linden Avenue in Scituate. And I just want to thank both of you for coming down. We had a chance to meet briefly on the site tour. And, this is a great economic development opportunity. And at a time when Scituate is looking for new and creative ways to add revenue to the town, this seems like an opportunity that can both do that and also have a number of other advantages as far as the way it allows us to control the growth in our town and potentially make it a little easier for developers and make Scituate a little bit more welcoming than our reputation has been in the past. So the EDC initiated this as part of the work that we have been doing with Matt Smith and the MAPC, and we wholeheartedly support the idea and very interested in hear how the conversation goes tonight.
Thank you. Sean, you want to say a few words?
No, that's okay.
Okay. Didn't want to I'd be remiss if I didn't give you the offer. Okay. So why don't we proceed into the questions that I think that are representative of probably what everybody is thinking or asking.
Sure. So the first question was about the money and where it comes from and whether it's guaranteed. I mean, it's nothing is absolutely guaranteed. There is a Smart Growth Housing Trust Fund established, which currently has about $2 million in it. We have every community that has qualified for a payment to date has been paid. The program got up and running in 2006. Just for a frame of reference in terms of, and I mentioned the number of districts and whatnot. It is a trust fund, so it's maybe relatively more protected than other sources of funds. We have run low a couple of times, and it's been recapitalized, and that, on Beacon Hill terms, I think it was relatively easy to do that. I think that it does enjoy some reasonable popularity with the legislature. So I don't know if that fully answers that question, but that covers the zoning incentive payment and the density bonus payment. The 40S money is not in the trust fund or paid out of the trust fund. That has to be appropriated each year. There has only been one community that has, there have been 3 communities that have applied for that funding. 2 have received funding. Chelsea just received it for 1 year. They did not qualify the second year because of changes in their Chapter 70 funding. Lakeville has received, I think, 4 years of payments. That's an annual payment. So there's not a lot to go on there. I think a lot of the development, 40R development that's gone on has been so far are primarily in sort of more urban gateway districts where, because of the current funding they're receiving through Chapter 70, I believe the formula has not resulted in any net increase in school costs.
And also the number of school-age children in most of the districts is probably under 10. So.
Yeah, the development has predominantly been 2 bedrooms or fewer to date. And there's been concerns raised about that. I don't know that there'll be any change in policy regarding that, but.
And the payments are one-time payments to the town?
With the exception of the 40S.
With the exception of?
Yes, although there was a related question about if you expand the district or create another district. I mean, the city of Lowell had a district in their downtown. They came in with, if what's being proposed for this smart growth zoning to apply to is nearby the existing, then it'll be considered an amendment. So you would, if you hadn't already maxed out for the 501 units for the $600,000 zoning incentive payment, you take the total of the old incentive units and the new incentive units, and whatever threshold that brought you to, payment threshold, the difference would be made up, and that's what happened in the case of Lowell. The second question regarding whether the design standards can be applied to a project if they have not yet been approved, and the answer is no. I mean, but you can, you could conceivably, put a mechanism in the zoning that allowed you to approve projects, and Elaine, correct me if I'm wrong, that, could be granted relief from the design standards, but, subsequent projects after that, it would be applied to that,
Yeah, in the design standards, if I take it, they're going to be separate from the zoning?
It's looking that way.
Yeah.
So you can adopt the zoning and have a project go through the zoning, but the design standards cannot be placed on that project until they've been promulgated, which means reviewed and accepted by us. So,
So in the alternative, then, a project could essentially be on hold until we approve the design standards. In other
or
words,
you could let it go through
Without
and not
design
attach the
standards.
design standards, yep.
Probably not like.
possibility.
Well, this district, though, that we're looking at has design standards already in place for much of it. It's got the design standards to go with the village business overlay district.
But they're not going to apply if the project is permitted under 40R.
Oh, okay, so I see what you're
40R
saying.
has to be all-inclusive zoning.
Even if they're not replaced at the time the project goes forward by the 40R design standards, they can't be utilized in place of,
You got to, the applicant picks a path, either the underlying existing zoning or the 40R zoning.
okay.
And in fact, to the extent the 40R zoning references other sections of the zoning bylaw, which we need to keep to a minimum, we usually have it needs to be dated. Essentially, there's the concern of maintaining the as-of-right integrity of the zoning in the district. And so all we really see and are able to monitor is amendments to the 40R zoning. So we need to know, and a developer needs to know, the idea is transparency, that they know, they can read the 40R zoning and know what is required.
Exactly what they need to do. Yeah.
I think this board was concerned just because we felt we have a limited time and we could potentially pass the zoning and understand what the limits were as far as the boundaries and all that. But then for the board to actually really do the design standards the way that they should be, that we didn't feel like we had enough time. And that's why we were thinking is, could you do it in phases? Or like approve the zoning or the actual, like the boundary and the district, and then maybe apply the design standards somehow later on, or have a window. I think that's where a lot of those questions were coming from, because, we're a volunteer board and we're not probably going to hire an architecture firm or a consulting firm to be able to develop those standards. And as Bob says, we have some, but they're very skeleton. I mean, they're just an outline, basically. They don't talk about materials or, the signage. And well, there's a little bit about signage, but it's not super detailed.
Yeah, you could go ahead with the zoning, it's just if the project comes in before the design standards are adopted, you can adopt the zoning, and it's there, like, if you want to go spring. And if the design standards aren't done by that time, it's zoning sits there, design standards are being worked on, but if a project comes in and it's going through and the design standards haven't been finished, then they don't apply to the 40R project, so.
Now,
I don't know if there's a project, like, if it's going to happen.
let's just say that, as Bob said, we do have some basic design standards that's part of the Village Business Overlay District. If we were to adopt that exact verbiage and wording for the 40R district, and then at some later time, like, amend that with maybe additional, let's just say as an example, materials and stuff, is that possible?
Yeah.
As
could-
long as they meet the definition of what 40R design standards are, which are,
Yeah, that's worth pointing out too, is that because it is an as-of-right process, they really need to be, clear, objective standards. So, in a lot of cases, there are design guidelines that are, more vague, and so, but assuming you can sort of meet that requirement,
Yeah.
there's no reason, you could come in and amend
But
them.
what it entails, though, is that if somebody comes in with those, what I'll call skeletal design standards that we've promulgated, then they wouldn't be governed by later design standards that are adopted if they're already in the permitting process. In other words,
No.
all they would
No,
have
no,
to
no.
meet is what was in,
Right.
what was adopted.
What was approved in 40R,
Right.
not the village overlay, because now they're gonna be
In 40R,
40R.
I'm talking 40R, yeah.
Yep, they apply and you can amend them with our approval.
But that
But the
particular
amendment
project, since
would not
it,
apply to
Right.
the project.
We wouldn't,
in
no,
process.
retro, no, that would be, phew.
So DHC's responsibility, or part of our responsibility with the design standards, is to determine that they're not unduly restrictive
Right.
in the statutory language or whatever, so.
Let me see if I understand this correctly. If we are able to pass 40R in the spring, but as Mr. Taylor stipulated, we might not have time to do the design, and a project comes forward under 40R, which we have to accept, does that mean that we have no control over the design? Because we really have nothing in place. So we can't dictate what they may or may not be able to do.
I thought I heard it a little differently, in that we could make pursuing a 40R conditioned upon the passage or the promulgation of design standards, so that somebody trying to file 40R before that had happened couldn't actually get
No, you
permitted.
couldn't. No. You could take, what I thought was, you could take what you're existing
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
and adopt
what I
them
was
as
thinking.
40R,
Right.
and then
No, I know that,
temporarily.
but I'm
Yeah, the
following up
provision
on
I
what
was,
Ann
or
said.
the concept I was mentioning is that, the zoning has a waiver provision. It would be a big waiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, the short answer to your question is no, I mean, you can't.
So in other words,
Unless these skeletal design standards
The
are
village one.
adopted with
but
the
if
initial
they are
zoning,
not in place,
then,
then they can pretty much,
right, they would be subject to what is in
In
the
the
zoning.
zoning.
so they'd still be subject.
to some...
In the
Village
40R
business.
zoning.
Oh, the 40 hours.
The 40R zoning.
I'm sorry.
But as
Not the underlying.
what I heard was, as a minimum, we do have some already Village Business Overlay District design guidelines, and then we could just transfer those to the 40R, which would have, there's store frontage, percentage, glass, there's height, there's gables, I know there's a number of things, but it doesn't get down to the level of materials, I think parking.
Window, well,
yeah.
parking is definitely already regulated, but, I mean, and I think it would be under either 40R or the Village Business Overlay District, and I think it would be the same, but, yeah, things like the type of windows and a lot of detail like that, shingles or clapboards.
Right, any kind of materials. I mean, there's nothing there right now. That's all been based on special permit and our design review committee that, so typically it's it is a special permit, and then we have a design review committee that does look at that for aesthetics
Yep.
and design value.
I think one of the problems that the board is facing is that there is an applicant that's likely to
Right.
come in
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
quickly.
and we totally understand that, and unfortunately, we're kind of constrained, but we'll keep batting this around, and if there's any way we can, any ideas we have in terms of how to address the situation, we'll follow up. And to answer the question of how long it would take us to review the design standards, I think I wrote down, I think I would recommend at least allowing a minimum of 30 days for us to respond.
I think I asked you this before, do those design standards have to go through town meeting before we give it to you?
Yeah, no, that, they don't,
No.
as I understand.
Because they're separate from the zoning.
Okay.
If some communities put them in the zoning, then they follow the zoning path.
Okay. Chris, I know earlier, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
I did, and you asked, the question that I was, which is about the ability to take the existing overlay
Okay.
zoning, so thank you.
Yeah, and we would just have to review and approve the existing overlay.
Okay.
move off design.
Okay?
No, it's the most important thing.
10%.
Chairman, quick question. Based on other towns, do other towns, when they promulgate the 40R bylaws, do they incorporate design review standards first with it? Or are they doing the 40R zone and then those bylaws and then subsequently drafting?
I would say it's been sort of a
Yeah.
pretty general mix. I don't have any exact split for you by any means, but we see them in there sometimes, and other times it's they're a separate document. And I should have mentioned also that any kind of the plan approval authority is the zoning term for the body that reviews the 40R projects, and they can adopt rules and regulations. Those also have to be, they don't have to be, done by the time the zoning is done or anything, but we would need to review those as well.
On the list that you showed, or the examples, even Belmont and Reading, the districts actually looked a little bit smaller maybe than what we're proposing. And I think one of the things we've also been grappling with when it comes back to design is, if it's a small parcel, maybe one development, you can come up maybe with the design standards a little bit easier, but as the parcel
Right.
gets or the district gets larger, then you have to be a little bit more generic, so to speak, or not generic, but you have to think about something that will impact maybe a different parcel in a different way. So with that being said, was I correct in that most of them seem to be a little bit smaller? And would you recommend maybe we try to somehow limit it, or are we thinking too big?
I don't really have a sense, honestly, of how big Scituate, because I think it's gone back and forth a little bit, but I think, Northampton was 150 units, Linfield was 180, so they may be smaller.
Lakeville was
250,
400.
Reading was 250.
Lakeville's 400. Yeah, so. And then we have the big.
So, but yeah, there were some small ones in there, to Belmont, and Belmont was certainly the smallest, yeah.
Well, it even looked like Reading was like a very narrow strip from the train station down, looked like the main street. I mean, I just kind of flashed up real quickly.
Yeah, and it's a different environment. It's an existing downtown,
Yeah.
a lot of small parcels, and
Okay, thank you.
there was a fair amount of Reading that was classified as substantially developed. And those parcels don't count, again, towards the zoning incentive payment. You can apply the smart growth zoning to them, and you don't have to meet the 40R densities, but they still have to be affordable as of right.
But the design standards go to.
Right. When you were talking about the densities, you also mentioned about, like, for instance, the MBTA lot. We know that part of it has been sold, but what about the part that is under the control of the MBTA? Was that used in the calculations? The lower lot?
No, because
No.
that's really not really
It's not
developable. I mean, you have to kind of really be honest about it. You
Okay, that's what I just wanna make
can't-
sure.
You can't fool around too much.
Yeah, I mean, if there was some indication from the MBTA, we got a letter or something saying they were going to make that available, I mean, yeah, but the underutilized land is really sort of meant to be kind of the low-hanging fruit in terms of stuff that's developable in the near term.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sorry. Introduce yourself.
Bob Berwick, 17 Driftway.
Thank you.
I had a question. The letter that came out from the town said that the density could be 25 units per acre, and according to the presentation, it says 20 units.
Minimum.
Just wondering,
20 is the minimum.
20 is the
but-
minimum?
Minimum.
But
Oh.
communities do sometimes
30.
allow more. Because often it'll be sort of calibrated to a existing development proposal that, so,
So who sets that density?
the town, you just, from the statute standpoint, you just have to meet the minimum 20.
And how did the town decide on 25?
Do you want to answer that?
It's going to be done, go ahead.
Well, the 25 was something the planning board discussed because it was maybe a little bit of an incentive over the 20. The 20, the planning board hasn't gotten a whole host of applications since they've had the 20 in place. And I think they were also looking at the possibility that, one or two parcels, if they wanted them to go with the 40R instead of going with the village business, they had to make the 40R a little more attractive.
And I think it also would act as an incentive to come back up and to do it now rather than wait.
Yeah.
That also reminds me of another question, Bill. You had mentioned that the 40R was overlay, but we had discussions in past meetings saying that it was confusing to have our village business overlay district and then the overlay of the 40R on top of that. So the way I at least tried to, I thought we understood it, was that you'd sort of do away with the village business overlay district where there was the 40R, or do you think it's just another layer on top?
You can, that's the town's choice.
Okay.
So you would have to do an amendment on a tandem with 40R to basically get rid of the village overlay for the part of the 40R district that you want to only be 40R zoning.
Do you have any recommendation or past experiences on that? Like what works well?
In most cases, it tends to be that there's not that situation where you've got an overlay that's, kind of, not that different from what the 40R would allow. Usually it's a pretty dramatic difference. We have a lot of 40Rs, like, just on industrial land, and
But if the town of Scituate really wants to see 40R zoning on that parcel and only 40R zoning on that parcel, then just make it so that it's only 40R. But it's totally up to the town to decide.
Okay.
Back to the questions.
Sure. The question, if a town were to meet the 10% affordable threshold, there's still available space in the building for you. The answer to that is no. I mean, no, the zoning is adopted, it's in place, and it's available for development. That said, it's worth pointing out that 40R is something that the subsidizing agencies need to take into consideration when they're issuing a project eligibility letter for 40B. And we've had two instances already in the town of Easton and in the town of Reading where a project eligibility letter has been denied, in part, not solely, but in part because there was a 40R in that community that was being implemented.
So just to make sure we all heard that, because I'm not sure I heard it, you're saying if a town does have 40R, that is something that can be used, for lack of a better word, to maybe disapprove, to have some backing for disapproving a 40B that's in the wrong location, or
It's the subsidizing agency's issue of
Oh, okay, so they wouldn't...
I mean, that may come into play later with, I can't speculate on that, really. I mean, it would really, it seems to me, just thinking about it, that's going to depend on, like, the size of the 40R district and...
What else is going on?
Yeah.
Existing percentage on the subsidizing housing inventory, all that. But it is something that these subsidizing agencies take into consideration when they're issuing a project eligibility letter.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I think we've kind of
We kind of answered that.
That's when the town voted against 40R, right?
Yeah, there's a small handful of districts where we've issued eligibility letters and they have not gone forward. They include Andover, Georgetown, Hingham, Newbury, Norwood, Randolph, and Weymouth. And I can't give you one single reason for why they didn't go forward. I think some of it was timing and, development cycles and, with the market crashing and sort of before the market crash was a hot button issue and after was not seen as one, and just sort of the typical challenges that communities face when changing zoning, really. Particularly zoning that's going to allow for higher density housing.
Performance bond?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. I think that It does, I mentioned the unduly restricted. Usually that kind of thing would be it seems to me, in the Plan Approval Authority's regulations, and we would have to approve the language. But yeah, it's not incompatible.
And I just want to caution that they should be sort of somewhat related to the public health, safety, welfare for that district. If the development has to rip up an intersection and put in streetlights and they walk away, that's definite. But, if there's only X number of units, you can't ask them to, and there's no kids living, do all these other things. It has to be related to the construction of the project, so. And my first answer to that was no, but it's been done in the past, so with 40R, because I thought only subdivision could do it, but I guess we've had it in other 40Rs, that language, so.
And the next question regarding, and I should probably,
Oh, yeah,
I'm sure what is right there.
what's it, the peer review inspection, you can have it, but it's not under the regular, 53G, because 53G states specifically what can be used, and 40R unfortunately is not listed there. However, you could have it in your rules and regulations, and generally with most permitting, when the applicant's in for permitting, it gives rights to go on the property and things like that, but true 53G is not, 40R is not eligible for that, so you have to come up with another mechanism.
There's a peer review provision in our model zoning. So if you want to do that, if you're going to be using outside consultants, we recommend you include that, or it should be included. And then, that again refers to Section 11A of the statute, which addresses peer review. In what ways is the 40-hour legislation more advantageous for a developer than village? I would say it may not be. It depends on what is allowed under the village overlay, all the details. I think that to the extent they're identical, 40R is as of right, so that's generally seen as more predictable and advantageous to a developer. And I also wanted to note here that there is some language in 40R that makes it more difficult or more onerous for somebody to appeal a 40R decision, where they have to post a bond covering twice the sum of the estimated carrying costs and associated legal fees of the property owner. So that may or may not be something that appeals to the developer.
I think we answered the next one,
Yeah.
about two districts near each other.
Right. So we base that on essentially what is it that made the first district qualify as an eligible location? In this case, it's a train station. If another parcel is added and it's in the same eligible location, it's going to be an amendment rather than a new district.
And you'll get the difference, just not the whole amount.
Are there any grant programs for planning? I think the town is already exploring the planning assistance towards housing, or has actually applied for the planning assistance toward housing, and that is really our only source for this kind of planning, and it's really just targeted towards housing production. So it's not going to fund, all aspects of a master plan. Really just those that relate to housing production. I think there are other, sources, including possibly the CPA, if that's adopted here. We've seen communities get in some limited cases, private foundation funding for charrettes and whatnot. But it is kind of a bit of I think you kind of have to go to each agency that, the issue relates to piece together the plan. The funding for it. And as far as infrastructure is concerned, I don't know if the infrastructure was in the context of planning for infrastructure or capital costs, but MassWorks is obviously the flagship infrastructure program for capital costs associated with infrastructure.
Good, thank you. Any questions?
We had one question on here that I think maybe got lost in the translation, but maybe, I don't think it's, somehow I think it got left out of the list, and that was, if you could just tell us a little bit, since sewer and water are big issues in Scituate as far as the capacity, and I know that the DPW has to sign off, or the, town administrator, but basically, the town has to sign off on the water and sewer being adequate for the additional units.
Yeah.
And, that could be a challenge for us. Can you just tell us a little bit about what's required for that?
Yeah, as you said, usually the DPW submits a letter certifying that they have infrastructure to support what the zoning allows. And that relates particularly to we have now a provision in our regulations that allows us to, partly for just this reason, we added it in 2013, because it just seemed wrong to penalize communities that, we call it our Southampton provision, because the town of Southampton wanted to do a 40R, and we thought it was great that they wanted to designate these smart growth zones, and they were thinking about planning and land use, but they don't have any sewer. And so, why can a 40B developer come into Southampton and do a 40B, but a community can't proactively plan and use 40R? And so we added a provision in the regulations that allows us to issue a letter of conditional approval where the district can go forward and implement projects, but they wouldn't be eligible for the zoning incentive payment until they could, basically show evidence that they have the infrastructure to support the units. And we have some flexibility there with, I think we've really, gone to great lengths to try to work with communities on that. And, if we can get, evidence that at least, a portion, if you look at the incentive payment thresholds and that you have enough to hit the minimum of what your threshold payment is, not necessarily what the zoning completely allows, if it's significantly above that sort of thing. I think we did that in the case of Georgetown. And then actually in Georgetown, I think we may have stipulated in our letter of approval that the incentive funds had to go toward the infrastructure essentially, which is, otherwise it's generally available for whatever municipal purpose. So we do try to think creatively about how we can, allow the community to go forward. But that is unfortunately kind of a statutory constraint. I don't know if that really answered your question. I mean, I think.
Well, it's sort of letting
something the whole
communities who can
community's
get a
gonna have to-
developer to help them figure out how to get the infrastructure. Before, those types of communities were not even allowed to adopt the 40R. Now you could adopt the 40R and then somehow show us later where you
And
got that.
it also doesn't have to be that the infrastructure is there, but that there's a credible plan for the infrastructure being implemented.
Because, yeah.
So you might go forward with a certain level of 40R development in a district that theoretically allowed, pick a number, 600 housing units, and maybe you go ahead with 40 because the infrastructure can support that number without strain, and maybe the next 40 is okay too, but at some point you need to say, wait a minute, we can't do any more, even though the zoning would allow more, until the infrastructure is upgraded.
I mean, it's sort of a curious provision to me, because the development's not going to, it strikes me that there's going to be, all sorts of issues if, the developer's not going to build the development if there's not the infrastructure to support it.
Right.
So, but it
we're
is, I
stuck
think
with it.
it's about the zoning incentive payment and the concern about, I think the crafters are thinking that they were going to, they didn't want to be doling out all this money
Right.
where there wasn't infrastructure.
Right. But I guess where I'm coming from is that though you've created a district, again, that theoretically could allow 600 units, you don't have to permit up to that level or allow developers to proceed up to that level. You can cut off the flow at some point at your discretion, depending on availability of infrastructure.
But you won't get the incentive payment until you certify to us.
Oh,
that-
understood. But you'll get
So,
the
yeah.
incentive payment for whatever number of units that you
Certify.
do develop.
Yep.
I think the important thing is that certification has to, it's a really meaningful statement. I mean, it has to be, otherwise it's, not worth writing.
Sure.
And I think the whole town has to kind of be on the same page with what that means and whether that's, something we can really say.
Yep.
Bill, John has something.
Just on that point, Mr. Chair, John Dennehy, 7500 Road. So are you saying that, okay, for the sake of argument, as a matter of right, you can put in X amount of units, say 50, and of course, it's zoned for 200, and then 50 go on, we get up to 100 units. Now our sewer, for example, is going to become overloaded because we have phases, and so we're looking at complete capacity. The next applicant comes in and says, okay, I want to put another 50 to go up to 150. Do the bylaws under 40R then have to be put in to say that the discretion based on town resources, you can deny it, or can they say, well, whether you like it or not, we're allowed to do this as a matter of right in the zone, so we're going to put 150, and the town's going to have to figure out how they're going to deal with the sewer issue. In other words, they're going to have to increase capacity.
Yeah, the infrastructure certification letter is really just about, it's about the incentive payment. So, if the zoning allows them to, you can do, there are provisions for planned infrastructure. If you're doing, and typically this comes up, we've seen it mostly in large single-site developments, or actually we haven't, we've talked about it in that context. At the end of the day, I think in most cases, there's been a developer there who's been able to basically issue a letter saying that they're going to put in a private wastewater treatment system. So that we accept as a plan for infrastructure.
This area actually is all sewer all around, so
Yeah,
that's why I'm
right,
asking.
right.
And I realize they're not going to want to do that.
So, yeah, in that scenario, it's going to be a little more challenging.
Can I just ask a few quick questions?
Sure.
Okay. The other question I had relates to 40S. So in other words, and I'm sorry, I came in a little late. If you're going to be doing a 40R, putting in units or apartments, or I presume apartments would be one aspect of condos, can the bylaws mandate that they have to have at least a minimum of 2 bedrooms, or for design criteria, or in order to ensure that yes, if they're going to be putting in 2 bedrooms, in all likelihood you're going to be giving maybe a single parent with a child, or a startup couple with maybe a child for the purposes of the educational component, as opposed to having a developer come in and say, okay, I'm just going to put 1 studio apartment or 1 bedroom, which really means you're not going to get that 40S component, because in all likelihood, you're not going to have children in that type of environment.
And the 40S component, it's only the difference if the school-age children that live in there actually add a burden, so it's not like $5,000 for every student that lives in there. The town has to prove that that student has burdened the school system in this Chapter 70 money, and the real estate taxes and everything else from the district doesn't cover that student. It's really only been, 40S has only been tapped to 3 communities, and 2 of them were once, and Lakeville has been 3 times, so.
So-
Just those calculations, would we be able to get that from you folks?
Yeah, I can send you, I'm happy to circulate the spreadsheet that, and DOR administers
Yeah.
Chapter 40S. What we do is we provide them the addresses of the new 40R developments, and they basically work with the Department of Education and figure out, how many school-age children are actually in there, going to public schools, or the responsibility of the school district. And
now those students are covered by increases in other
Gotcha,
things.
between the other calculations,
Yep.
between Chapter 70 and...
Right.
Yep.
and the-
So, we're happy to share that spreadsheet.
Once you forward it to me, and then I'll forward it over.
Okay.
Thank you.
And as far as, the idea of encouraging, units with more bedrooms, we would applaud that, because there's actually been a lot of criticism from some of the housing community about the lack of, say, 3 bedrooms. So, and we will, the 40R legislation and, or at least the regulations talk about providing housing for a range of households. So any kind of, needless to say, any kind of, language
Restrictive.
limiting the number of units per bedroom is not going to fly.
Okay. No, I think, in the interest of time, I think we'll go right to Matt, and let Matt do this.
Okay.
And talk to us as to why Greenbush. Lou.
How did I lose the mouse? No.
It's when they do the
The aquarium.
strange and double screen. There we go. Remember the fish? Don't realize it's
Greenbush
double
Pond.
screen.
You want to do it? Yeah. Because you know when you're talking. I have bills down like that.
There you go, exactly. Where's the slide? There we go. This is, yep.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. Talking to Laura, what I've just done is I've provided just a kind of a quick overview of how we got to the 40R recommendation, and then currently the area of which we're talking about would be for the larger 40R district within the Greenbush area. So essentially, the 40R was recommended in the economic development study based in part on the market opportunities that were identified. For instance, that it identified there was the opportunity for about 80,000 square feet of retail throughout the community, and that one of the main ideas is that you would want to concentrate that retail development in your village areas, particularly if it was near transit, create those walkable environments. There's also the identification for about 700 new units of housing over the next 10 to 20 years, just based on population projections, especially considering that there'll be the aging of the population. So you would benefit from having alternatives to single-family units, particularly multifamily. So when we looked at Greenbush, one of the main recommendations was to concentrate new development in the existing villages, and Greenbush, hands down, held the most opportunity for redevelopment based on the fact that there's vacant and underutilized properties. However, in terms of creating that kind of more village environment that is becoming more and more popular, particularly in the real estate market, the issues with Greenbush in the overall area is that there's really no clear center. That the higher residential densities we were talking about in the study really weren't supported even under the village overlay. It's about 16 to 20. And then there's moderate retail demand, so you want to concentrate it, and this would be the best opportunity to do so. In terms of what we did is we came up with a conceptual plan within the study, just kind of talking about how that would be, and the idea with some laser was to really concentrate a higher mixed-use transit-oriented within the most walkable areas to the actual transportation amenity. Then along Country Way, have more of a more moderate mixed-use neighborhood village, and then around the periphery would be to more have residential multifamily that would be able to not only provide more opportunities for people to live close to the transit amenity, but also to support a more walkable retail environment as well. So that's where the 40R Smart Growth District strategy came up, as it could be a really good way to encourage, specifically strategically, where you would want that higher density mixed-use residential development. So this is just some context, and I'm just going to show. So this the yellow is your current village business overlay, and then the red is what we've been talking about so far about what the potential 40R district could be. So really basically areas east and actually south would be in the district, and the areas within the village business district overlay to the west would not be included. And there's specific reasons why we kind of came to that conclusion throughout this process. We looked at kind of just different considerations of where would it make most sense, and these are the 6. I'm just going to talk everybody through them pretty quickly. So one of the issues is we were looking for proximity to the train in terms of walkability and the character. And as you know, this is the train route right here. There's actually a big sound barrier. So really this area is the most walkable. It's actually the most attached to the train station. So this is the most walkable area. So that would make sense. But this is, you do have to kind of go around. There are some cut-throughs. But it just made more sense. There's also a lot of single-family residential that's interspersed in here, and where that's not the case. So this, it's mostly commercial parcels, and it's a budding commercial, so it's not, for the most part, as much of an issue. The other thing is development potential. Larger parcels are going to have much more probability of being redeveloped in this manner. And if you even look on this side, there are several much larger parcels compared to these, much smaller parcels that if you're looking for, to get more multifamily or like a nice mixed use with retail on the ground floor, you have a better chance. You'd have to likely find someone who can assemble parcels, which is much more time consuming. So that didn't make as much sense. And the village business over here would actually still allow for very similar densities. Traffic volumes, we mentioned the retail component in the mixed-use areas. So higher volumes around, far higher volumes of traffic go along the Driftway, as well as you get the commuter traffic going in here on a daily basis. So that's really important when you're talking about a mixed-use, like kind of walkable retail. You need that visibility, you need that customer base, and you're going to see the customers going in and out more this way than the more residential pattern that would be going up here. So this is much more supportive of those smaller neighborhood retail, whereas this could truly support that new village style, kind of emulate some of the characteristics that are in the harbor area right now. The other idea is that, you want to talk about amenities. One of the things we talk about a lot in the economic development study is actually when it comes to the residential component, quality of life is very important, and amenities are increasingly important if you want for that kind of alternative to like the suburban, single family kind of isolated home. Here you'd have the transit, you'd have the retail component hopefully within here, but then also there's nice connections to the waterfront down here, and you could actually be a nice marketing piece for that kind of new development. So that was another consideration. So again, it was continuing to be like the opportunity was on this side. And then finally, there are some environmental considerations. These are the buffers around some of your, this is the reservoir, this is a 400-foot required buffer, and that has some limitations for development, where you have to have different things. And then the white down here is actually from streams and wetlands. And really, as you can see, this area, that's in the village business, there are far more constraints, whereas this area doesn't really have those. So when you really take all of those considerations, when you're thinking of the walkability, the actual the higher volumes of traffic for the retail component, for the success of that, the actual amenities that would be there in terms of the recreational amenities, it really made much more sense to focus in on this area. The idea too, and when it comes to the 25 units, that's also the bonus. That's how you can concentrate that higher development in this area and then stick more with what you've already allowed for those densities under the village business. So that's where, it's just a really quick overview of how we got to this and why we're talking about this tonight and the areas of which would make the most sense for this 40R proposal. So.
Your timing is impeccable.
Perfect.
I was told to be fast.
If you're listening to it on cable, you can just put it on slow.
That's my product.
Time for a short commercial.
Laura, why don't you just take a couple minutes and just talk about what the process is and how is it different than the normal zoning article?
Okay, and then maybe you want to go to the public after?
Yep.
Okay. This is a little different from a zoning article, as Bill just said, because not only is there the approval of the zoning by town meeting, but there's also a state approval process. And the state process is somewhat involved. We were just talking about this letter that's got to come from the town saying that there is sewer capacity that, typically, I think, comes from the DPW director. And I'm sure that would be in coordination with all the other boards in town, the selectmen, who were the sewer and water commissioners in Scituate, and the town administrator, and other town officials. So that's one piece of it. There's a lot of mapping. MAPC has been very helpful with that. There's also some analysis of why would these parcels be likely to develop. There's a selection of certain parcels that seem to be what's termed underutilized, and it's somewhat subjective, but when you look at the assessor's data, there's information on what the rents are per square foot, and you can really see some big differences. When you're looking at an industrial parcel like Concrete Pipe, their rent per square foot is way lower than some of the office parcels. So that describes some of the process. Now, one thing that that we're having to work with pretty carefully is the time frame of the state approval relative to the town meeting. approval. And I'm thinking now that to get this letter through the process about the sewer, if we can in fact get that for whatever area we choose, that may take us, a couple of, maybe a selectmen's meeting. I'm not sure what's going to be involved with that. So it may be the end of, they only take the applications at the end of the month, and we were kind of shooting for January, but I think we're probably more likely to be February. So maybe I'll turn it back to you with how that's going to fit into an April 13th town meeting. And then we probably will hear from the Attorney General in August, and I think you were saying today that the approval actually won't be complete until we get that Attorney General approval. So I'm going to turn it back to you, but all of this kind of relates, I don't think they're in the room, but I'm not sure who represents them, the MBTA, parcel development team.
Yeah, I've sort of indicated this already, but I would just again sort of say that, a lot of stuff in the application pertains to the zoning incentive payment. So we can, we have some ability to condition our letter of approval as well, our letter of eligibility as well as our letter of approval. So I'm not, from our standpoint, we can work with the sewer certification. If that's something you're not comfortable doing right now, we can still move ahead. It just, and some communities, I should add, even when they qualify for the zoning incentive payment, don't ask for it right away. I think they're concerned that, they're going to have to give it back because there is a clawback. We have not exercised that clawback yet at all because we're able to find good cause, and basically we've, determined that the economy has been good cause in most of the circumstances. So I think that's something worth thinking about is what of our requirements are associated with the zoning incentive payment and what is more just about getting the zoning in place and getting it adopted. I mean, if the town decides to move forward with this. I think that, we can work with that timetable. As far as the AG approval, yeah, I mean, that's not really honestly different from any other zoning. I mean, it all has to go to the AG to get approved, and I think there have been circumstances where towns have asked if they can move forward with a project before we issue our final approval. I think what way we've said is, my understanding anyway, is that they might be able to accept an application, but not to make a determination on it before we've issued our letter of approval. And Elaine is more familiar with 40A than I am.
No, that's pretty much it, but once you get your application into us, and we give you the letter of eligibility, the adopting of 40 hours zoning amendment is identical to any other one. So it's the application process that might be different, but 40-hour zoning adoption is strictly 48, same exact process. The other thing about the last day of the month, that's statutory, we will accept. If you want to give it to us, now we'll start reviewing it or whatever. So the last day of the month just gives us statutorily from that date, you have the 30 days, but if you give it to us on the 15th, we're not going to wait till the 30th to start reviewing it, so.
We've already begun reviewing the initial zoning that you submitted.
So we've started, if you give it pieces, we'll start reviewing it.
Okay.
And that's really the piece that is most time consuming for us. The other stuff is just kind of math, in terms of, issuing that letter of eligibility and identifying the number of incentive units, which parcels count and which ones don't. And, as you say, I mean, it's not entirely spelled out in the regulations. I mean, we put language in there, and, it's kind of, the onus is a little bit on the town to make the case that certain parcels qualify as underutilized. But things like employment levels, and again, that phrase, marginal or declining use, I think I sent you maybe, I think a piece that MAPC had done for Malden that sort of looked at 4 parcels in Malden and categorized them as either substantially developed or underutilized, and basically laid out some data points for that.
Okay.
So theoretically, if I owned the land in question at the MBTA lot, let's say, and I'm the developer, and I've been waiting to file an application because I'm waiting for the town to see which direction this may go. Did I hear that as a developer, I would have to wait till August, potentially, till the AG says this is final? Or, I'm just trying to figure out from the developer's perspective what they're facing, depending on which direction the town may go.
It's not fun.
So, let's say not that I'm ready to like put a shovel in the ground tomorrow, but, you know, I was thinking of putting an application in, but I've held off. So
I don't know what practice has been, but I don't think, as Elaine said, I don't think, any zoning, whether it's 40R or not, that a community is supposed to be, is really in effect until the AG has approved it.
Yeah.
So,
Be careful.
I think the point
The
is,
answer
the
is yes
timeframe,
there.
right.
Yeah,
yeah, the answer is yes, but the timeframe is no different than it is for existing zoning, so
exactly.
it's no shorter, no longer.
It's different
I
from
mean, we do have that
developer's
final step where we issue our approval, but that's a pretty quick turnaround after we,
It's different from perspective, though, that we have an overlay district.
Yeah,
So it's
Right,
not like
yeah,
we're
right.
yep.
proceeding
So-
the
today.
developer
Yep.
has another
Yeah,
option.
I mean, they could
Yeah.
put a shovel in the ground, not tomorrow, but
Yeah.
they could submit an application
Right.
tomorrow. if
Or-
they
It'd
so
be a special permit.
if
Yeah,
they
that's
so
what I was gonna say,
desire.
unless they want to wait for the
Yeah.
as of right.
Yeah.
I know this is, I'm not,
I know it's all theoretical, but
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
trying to
no,
figure it
yeah.
out.
Oh, no, theoretical's great. You can switch, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe our situation is a little bit unique just because we do have potentially someone kind of waiting in the wings.
right,
The
right.
uniqueness of it is if they wait, we get paid, if it passes.
Yeah.
Okay, what I need to do now, any questions from the public? Okay, what I need to do now is to go into our public hearing. So the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the Greenbush Driftway Area Smart Growth Overlay District. It's defined under the Mass General Laws, Chapter 40R, 760 CMR, and 59.05. So this meeting has been duly posted. And what we're looking at now is to come back up and look at specifically, instead of 40R, 30,000 feet, now we're looking at 40R as it relates to Greenbush. And I think we've handed out a copy of the bylaw for proposed zoning.
Does everyone have a copy of the bylaw who wants one, or is there anyone who hasn't received one who would like one? Okay, a couple people.
We're happy to stay, or if you'd like us to leave, I don't know.
Say whatever you want.
Whatever you'd like.
Well, we're not going to talk about you if you stay. Nor would we
Would you
talk
like
about
to talk about us, then we can leave?
what would may,
Whatever you'd be more, oh,
Yeah,
sure.
whatever.
if you don't mind, because it's
Nope,
about a
yep.
half hour or
This
so.
is by the way.
Oh, no, we're happy to stay, we just weren't sure if you wanted us to.
And I did have a question for them concerning maybe specifically Greenbush, if that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's,
They'd like us to stay, which we're fine. I didn't want them to think.
if I may, Laura, could you lead us through this?
Well, I think this is basically an opportunity to hear from the public, other town officials, and anyone else, their thoughts about this. Is this a good thing for the town? Is this something that should be adopted? What are the pros and cons? And then for the planning board to, I don't think there's a vote that needs to be taken, but there's just an opportunity to get some input, and maybe at the end, some of the decisions about, do we keep going with this? Is it full speed ahead, or do we change course or not? Some of that's a little bit clearer at the end of it, hopefully.
Okay, that makes sense. So, I guess we've tried to make it a copy of the bylaw, or the zoning bylaw available, and I didn't know if there are questions on it. Concerns about doing the area? Identify yourself, sir.
My name is Bill Dillon. So my question is, could someone summarize the delta between the existing zoning and what the 40R would do? So is it a 20% bump in development?
Sure, maybe that's a good place to start.
It's right here.
With the zoning that's in place now, which I'm not absolutely sure that you're in it, actually. I think you may or may not be in that Village Business Overlay District because you're not in, part of your property is zoned business and part of it is zoned residential. Is that, are you in agreement with that?
I was talking about the 40R, the total picture.
Oh, okay. So with a village business zoning, you can get a density of 16 units per 40,000 square feet, or 18 to 20, 17 to 20 with a public benefit. And that translates to 17 per acre or up to 21 per acre with a public benefit. The difference between that process and the 40R process is that that's something called a special permit, which involves a 4/5 vote of the planning board. The by right process is a 3/5 vote. The special permit is fairly straightforward for an abutter to appeal. The by right process is much more involved. There's a bond that has to be posted by someone who wants to appeal, and it's onerous to appeal it. With the special permit, the planning board can impose conditions that aren't spelled out in the bylaw. With the 40R, they have to pretty much stick to what's in the bylaw or what's in the design standards. With the village business, there's a 15% affordability, and it's rounded down. With the 40R, there's a 20% affordability, and it probably would be rounded up most of the time to make sure that the town met the 20% for the whole district, which is one of the requirements that the state puts on the town. So, I don't know, do you think I left anything out?
Yeah, I would only say if you're planning to exempt smaller developments
From the affordability?
If you're not, then if each project is 20%.
I don't know how the town could, agree that they're going to make the 20% for the whole district.
I don't know if you pointed out that under the 40R, we're proposing 25 units per acre. I mean, you said what the
Yeah,
village
thank you. Yeah.
overlay was, but...
That's one of the more basic changes, is that right now it's up to 20 or essentially 21 if you're dealing with an acre, and the 40R would be 25.
And then a big difference, I think, is that the town gets a payment. Like right now, the Village Business Overlay District, we can permit, through special permit, the 20 units per acre.
Well, approximately. It's 21. Yeah.
And that's great, but the town doesn't get any kind of compensation. In the 40R, you're allowing it by right, and the state is compensating Scituate a certain amount per unit. So there's an incentive to the town from the state. That's a big difference, I think, to know.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? When we're talking about, we're at 20 in the Village Overlay District, and we're going to 25 here. Is it only the incremental units that are eligible?
It's the difference between the as of right, what's allowed currently as of right.
As of right, not by special permit.
Right, so the overlay, the
It
existing
would be
overlay
everything.
doesn't hurt you.
It doesn't hurt.
That was a concern that I had, so it's really basically what the underlying zoning is what does it. The overlay doesn't change the underlying zoning.
Yeah, it's the 10,000 per unit.
The underlying zoning is 4 per 40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's by special permit, so none of them,
Well, actually, it
No,
is
that's
by
not
right.
special.
The 4 is actually by right. The 4 is by right.
Paul Donovan, I'm one of the owners of Such Road Parks on New Driftway Road. Just to be clear, if you change it to 40R and somebody wants to go under the special permitting process, can they still do that? Under your bylaw?
That's something the planning board is going to have to
Oh, all right, they haven't decided yet?
Yeah, that's the question I asked about whether it's just another overlay.
Yeah.
And everything kind of exists all the way down through, because there's multiple, because if you're in commercial zoned, and then there's the village
Right.
business overlay, and then on top of that might be the 40R.
Yes,
Or,
three different things. Yeah.
or you could say, as we just heard, maybe if it's just the 40R, you say, well, okay, you don't have the Village Business Overlay District. And I don't think we've decided on whether it's an overlay.
I thought that was in this handout, that what you were recommending.
There was some discussion about that, and actually, the planning board might get something if you know, from your thoughts, if you have some ideas you want to talk about why it's better to do the special permit?
You know, as a property owner, the more flexibility, the better, you know. So I would recommend that the owner or the developer have the choice of which one they would want to choose. Somebody, for some reason, might want, you know, all commercial building there, which they can do right now. So.
No, I think it's a good point, but that's, I think at least I'm looking for two pieces of input from the group. One is there a need to change the overlay district now? Or do we want to eliminate it, or do we want to keep it? The second thing is the scope of the area. What are your thoughts regarding whether that area that would be under the 40R, whether it's too large, too small? So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that. Bob?
The way it's drawn now, have you forecast how many units of housing you generate?
Yeah, it would be about close to 500, but about 400 of those would be over and above what the zoning would allow now, what the by right zoning would allow now.
And since we were talking about the differences, this is kind of a good way to kind of, I had this question about, currently, we've done several of these village business overlay, the special permit that have come before the planning board. And as Laura mentioned, that we can condition those, and one of the conditions was like the sequencing of construction, because we had an issue with one where the residential portion was created, but then the commercial and retail wasn't done, or it was, that was the last part of it, and then that never really got done. So is there any way with the 40R that you can do something like that, where you can condition the construction sequencing? Because those are the kind of things, like with the special permit, that I see the advantage of. We can do a lot of things like that.
There's a provision for planned infrastructure.
Yeah.
We haven't had too many communities take advantage of that. I have to punt on that a little bit, I'm sorry.
Okay.
There is a provision for planned infrastructure, which we haven't really had any communities take advantage of, so I haven't, it's not right in the forefront of my mind right now, but I will look at that and see if, how much flexibility there is with that.
Because I think, that's kind of what we're grappling with now, is that the special permit gives the planning board a lot of leeway, right, to impose certain conditions that we hopefully feel are necessary, or that are beneficial to the community, basically. So
you would want say it is 40R, you'd want the planning board to be able to, if it's a commercial and a residential project, by one developer, or?
Yes. It's like to say, like, maybe there were, maybe there were 3 buildings, and that the commercial was done either first or as part of the overall construction, so we don't end up with, unfortunately, where we are right now, where we've got a residential portion and there's no retail or commercial.
I think we'll get back to Laura or someone.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this is a public hearing and that information would be helpful right now, but
We've never come up in this situation. I don't want to answer it
there's certainly
correctly
been
either.
developments, 40R developments where the commercial, Linfield, I don't know, I think the commercial led the residential, but I don't think, I don't know if it was a result of anything in the zoning.
No, it was economic.
So there's nothing,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even
preventing that from happening, but whether the zoning can require that,
Yeah.
One of the downsides of maintaining, at least thinking out loud, maintaining both the overlay and the 40R goes back to our design criteria. Because unless the design criteria is the same, then I end up with a mismatch as I come along. Not that I think somebody would come back up and willingly put something that was totally out of place there, but you'd have less control over it in terms of building a continuity of the area.
Yeah. You could potentially have two adjacent projects. One came in the Village of, one came in the 40R.
One with, if you would, the skeleton guidelines that we have now, and the other with those that are ultimately approved by you for the 40R.
But the overlay district would be subject to a special permit, which would give us more flexibility to sort of pull in those other design standards too, right?
Agreed.
That's a good point.
Any thoughts about the size and the location of the area that's being proposed? Sir?
Scott Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road. I got a quick look at the stuff inside the red, which I assume is the area that we're looking for the 40R. And I don't know how, I was on the Conservation Commission, and it seemed like there were a number of areas that are resource areas that were not delineated on that. There's the Herring Brook that runs right down the middle, through the middle of that area. It looked like the MBTA mitigation site was shown as not being a resource area. So I just hope that you have fully vetted that the resource areas are properly identified. And I also don't like the idea that you're kind of asking the Scituate Concrete, which is probably the only industrial business we have in town. Now you're going to have to allow somebody to convert that into a housing project. I mean, that piece that, I'd like to see the industrial process stay here. I mean, it's been here for a long time. I mean, it's in the middle of that district, and it's probably a motivation to get for them to move if they're, taken from another location. So those are two issues that I see right now is do you have an accurate evaluation of the resource areas? You may not get 400, you may lose half of that thing to resource area. And also in that 400 units, are you assuming that the two office buildings that we have at the entrance right off the Driftway are now going to be taken down and rebuilt? Because one of them's fairly new and the other one is definitely older. Because they're not going to, at least the new one I don't expect to change. And the one across the street, that's an older building and that may change. I mean, so I want to make sure that we're accounting for the businesses that aren't going to change because they're in those counts of 400 units and what this district, and if they're not going to change, why put them in the district? And do we want them to change? I mean, do we actually want them to change? And those are hard questions that I'm just bringing up that should be thought about, because those two office buildings are definitely have been located in this district.
The state actually required that the town look at the natural resources and any required buffers to those resources. So the Herring Brook was mapped, the reservoir was mapped, the zone of contribution, or the Zone A to the reservoir was mapped, and that was one of the reasons why the district was where it was. But the buffer areas, the no-build buffer areas were not included in the developable land. I mean, the state makes you go through like a very structured process where all of those are mapped and then they're taken out of the area. The town, the planning board has to look at which parcels would be likely to develop. The Jacob Hatch building was certainly not one of those parcels. I mean, it was just redeveloped. It's got a brand-new big building on it that's a beautiful building. It's, as far as I know, it's well occupied. On the other hand, if you go all through that district, there are parcels that are not like that at all. And it's a real mixture of some great new development with some parcels that really need a little something. And this is something that the state has promulgated, and it also makes sense in terms of encouraging some type of development that's compatible with the neighborhood because of the design standards. And anyway, so that's what led where we are now.
And I think it's also fair to say that, we're trying to set up a framework here, but using my theoretical, if I own the medical building on the Driftway, there's nothing, I'm not forced to change it. I can keep that medical building as long as I want to. This isn't forcing any developer or any landowner to do anything that they don't want to do. All it is putting a framework in place. So Scituate concrete pipe, they can stay there for the next 100 or 200 years if they want to. So we're not trying to force anyone out per se. I don't think.
No, but you're giving them much more motivation to leave. I mean, you're by right giving them the fact that, I don't know exactly the acreage in Scituate concrete, but I assume it's over an acre, to build a 25, 30 unit apartment building, which right now, they would have to go through a special permit thing to get 20 units on that piece of property, because they're in the business overlay district, right?
Yeah, they're not, actually.
No, they're not in the
Yeah.
business. So by right, you have just made it extremely easy for them to make a decision to leave.
But I mean, I think, there are a lot of things involved with that.
Otherwise, they have to go through a special permit process, which is onerous at best.
Correct.
With all due respect, change is inevitable. Whether we want it to happen or not, it's inevitable. And the story was that if the MBTA had changed their station, which was supposed to originally go in the landfill, Scituate concrete pipe would have been bought for X amount of dollars, and they were planning to move to Middleborough. A lot of their business is now in Marshfield. So what if, could if, should if, whatever. This is all about really, I think, expanding our tax base, that we want to bring more tax dollars somehow, some way into this town, and not, while it will never be huge, it will be better than nothing. So, and it really boils down to the Scituate concrete pipe or the Driftway Medical. It's all about the money. If the incentive is there for them to make whatever it is that they need to make, then it's up to somebody else who will purchase that property within the framework of what we're hoping to do here this evening to go forward and come up with something better.
Okay. Any other questions? Bob?
The lump sum payment, it's a two-tiered payment plan, and the town is reimbursed so much per unit. It's actually permanent.
Yeah, you get paid on what the capacity would be, so it's, and then
So
you...
that 500 figure would be the payment.
Yeah, that's a nice number, 501.
500 would be what the payment.
So you get that, so you get payments for that, and then as each of the occupancy permits come back, you get a residual on it.
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yep.
Yep.
And there's some initial, for just passing the zone.
Creating zoning.
That's the, based on the number of units that the zoning allows.
Projected number.
So that's the first incentive payment, and that you can ask for after the year, it's in effect. And then as each certificate of occupancy comes, it's $3,000 per eligible unit.
But that's market and affordable. By eligible, we just mean the project is eligible.
Yeah, sorry.
Meets the zoning.
Any other questions? You're awful quiet, John. No other questions? I'm glad you came.
Thank you.
You got a
What
question?
current zoning regulations regarding parking pertain to a 40R, or are there 40R parking regulations?
Typically,
I think in the zoning it comes out, it's a little bit more relaxed than what it is under the overlay district.
Yeah, what we've discussed has been using the ones for the Village Business Overlay District, which I believe you're in that now, but they're more relaxed than a typical commercial development because of being close to transit.
It also gives you credit for time of day. If you're serving breakfast and you're serving dinner and the breakfast crowd leaves, then you can use that parking for dinner. So you don't need to have, so they take credit for that as well as the parking's available with the tea. So the parking requirements are actually, they're reduced, not significantly, but they're reduced. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, this was on the agenda, I think, a little bit, or maybe there was a line item on the selectmen's meeting last night. I was just curious if there was any input from Sean.
What, last night?
I believe.
Tuesday night.
Last Tuesday night? No, we had a discussion when Chris came before us a couple of weeks ago about this.
Oh, I thought that I saw it on the agenda, so.
There was, Sean, correct me if I'm incorrect, I was at the meeting, and it had to do with putting the article on the warrant Tuesday night.
All right, okay.
I think that's what,
We're waiting for the vote from here first.
Hmm.
All right.
I think that's what you saw.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Do we need a vote to go forward?
If you want, it sounds like other boards are looking for that, so if you want, it would be a good idea.
What I'm going to suggest is, given the consideration that we're talking about the infrastructure, available infrastructure, and how we could treat it, what I would suggest is a vote that says basically, we vote the entire parcel to go forward with that, assuming that we can get the necessary letter of support for the infrastructure, or some subset of that, to the extent that we can't get that, but what we can actually provide septic for, or sewer for now.
So you would reduce the size of the district?
So
if
it's really
you
would
couldn't-
be vote, and I'm not sure how to make the motion, I'll just tell you what I think it ought to sound like. It's basically, sits there and says that we vote, the first choice would be to vote that the area that's been identified and published with the public hearing. The second would be to come back and have a second subset of that, to the extent that the infrastructure letter was not forthcoming in the first one. That make sense?
Yeah.
So now that we've figured out that, at least, does the board, does that make sense to the board?
I would say, do we even need to do the second part, though? I was just curious, if we go forward with the district the way it is, if it does, let's say there was a problem with the
We're running a
sewer.
couple minutes late.
My fault. You are. I thought we had gone on.
No, so we're running a couple minutes late, but you will, I'll make it up for you on the other end.
No doubt.
But with the if, let's say, we do vote to go forward with the current boundaries of the district, the way we've discussed it, if there was an issue with the sewer capacity from the DPW, I mean, that would, we'd still have to come back and revote that anyway, wouldn't we?
Well, the difficulty is the timeframes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you're going to go
Okay.
down to the MBTA parking lot
That's exactly where I'm
parcel.
headed. In other words, that we come back up and look to do the entire area, to the extent that we
Oh,
can't do the
okay.
entire area. What I would do is I would come back up and make a single area.
For the
i.e.,
parcel.
Specifically the MBTA parcel.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, one complication is that we were planning on advertising the zoning article. Actually, the ad would go in the paper tomorrow. So that leaves things kind of hanging. We could try to change the date of the zoning hearing, or we could start with the big area and then just go with the smaller one by an amendment at town meeting. But just to let you know, it could get a little bit,
Okay.
a
My
little bit
concern
bumpy,
is
but we'll still
I'm
get
looking for a
there.
vote that allows us to go forward as quickly as we can.
Yep.
Because if I don't now, then I'd have to come back and have another meeting, another vote this year.
But we could, you said, amend it at town meeting.
Yep, you could do that.
That might be a pretty decent way to do it, without muddying the water too much.
Yeah,
If we
so
can do it
I-
cleanly.
Well, I think the cleanest way would be to go forward with the entire district that we've got shown. It's very easy to present to town meeting, the shrinking of that district to the MBTA parcel, as opposed to expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I would agree with that.
You got a couple people that have some questions in the back.
Sure.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm Joe Lynch, I'm with Conroy Development. We're the developer, designated developer on that MBTA parcel. And I came a little late, so I wasn't sure exactly what the timing was of all this, because we're sort of stuck in the middle here, trying to figure out which zoning we're going to.
We talked about that, yeah.
I thought I owned the parcel.
No, that was the hypothetical.
You missed my hypothetical, I own the parcel.
I don't know the best case scenario for the 40R. I certainly know what's going on with the village overlay, but maybe you had this conversation, but I'm sorry, I wasn't here at the time.
One of the things that came up is we have to get a letter provided by the head of the DPW for sake of argument. He may not be the person, but somebody of that caliber, to come back up and make a determination that there's adequate infrastructure to come back up and at least to start the project, to start the overlay district, the 40R, okay? Or there's enough capacity to come back up and complete the 40R. Whether you start or whether you complete it, it ends up, basically, it's a payment it's a payment threshold for determination of what comes back to the town. Okay, so what we're talking about is looking at that area that we've been told that we're unable to come back up and sewer the entire area, or, we haven't got an official response to that. But that's the question, and the question is, if I can't do the entire area, do I do some subset of it? And given that, a subset would be the area, the property that you know are taking care of. That's really the question that we're working through now.
But I think the question was, when would that 40R, large or small, be available as a route for the prospective development?
Right.
What,
I think
we were talking about August, right?
And that would probably be, I think the earliest would be August of this year.
Yeah, because it has to go through the town meeting, and then go through the state, and then the Attorney General has to approve.
And then it goes back to the DACD for final.
From the town to the AG to us.
To us. Yeah, so the idea was that a project couldn't be approved until August.
And
It could
when
be submitted before then.
And when it comes back to us, all we do is make sure that the zoning that we approved at the front end is substantially the same as what the AG approved, and that's all we look at the back end.
So we would be working on permits and approvals if we were working on the 40R approach. Let's say it was approved at town meeting. We would file something under that and then assume that everything's going to get put together.
Well, we would be filing now to get a preliminary approval from the state.
Right, no, I'm...
So-
He's talking about his...
On your end, yeah.
So you're saying it gets past the town meeting, you would file an application under 40R?
I'm just thinking ahead.
Right.
And is that the process?
And we would
Yeah.
pursue that process, but couldn't approve anything until the AG had signed off on it and the HCD
So we
had
have
signed
to
off.
make a judgment whether we're at risk or not, and...
Agreed.
I think the planning board might also want to hear, if you're really planning on using the Village Business Overlay District, then they might tend to leave that in place. I mean, I think they want to hear from you about what's your best.
Well, we're generally open to it. I mean, there are pluses and minuses to the new zone. I don't think we know exactly what they all are, because we're still talking about what that is, but when Laura brought it to us, said, sir, we'll talk about it, we're interested in it. Probably the difficulty for us is the time frame that we have with the MBTA in terms of having to purchase the property. And I believe that's middle of July. So unless we get extensions from them now, we'll probably have to go under the village overlay. Unless you advertise tomorrow, and then I don't know what the zoning is.
Well, we are actually sending the ad to the paper tomorrow, but, yeah, but the ad couldn't go in until...
Well, and it couldn't be approved until town meeting, which is what, April 13th?
Yeah, April 13th is the actual date of town meeting.
But I think if you're getting rid of the village overlay,
No, we're not.
then we can't freeze the overlay.
We're not proposing to
Yeah, I
eliminate
think
the village overlay.
It sounds
I
like,
think they backed off of
honestly,
that
we're going to
idea.
leave it.
Yeah, from what I hear.
You'll have the option to go either route.
Oh, no, okay.
So he could buy and then choose.
That's better.
Then I know
He could buy it and then choose which one.
Yeah.
And can I ask it, would your primary option be to file under the village overlay district at this point? I mean, is that, all things considered?
It's all sort of timing. It's us trying to evaluate timing with the MBTA. If they want to work with us, and in terms of us wanting to work with you guys, then that'd be great. If they say, no, you gotta buy it, then we're gonna have to file something right away on the village overlay.
So are you trying to accomplish an approval before you close?
Yes.
Good luck with that.
Well, that's going to be difficult.
That'll be hard no matter what.
Really fast.
All on the way.
Yeah.
Special permits must go fast.
The special permit process.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It really varies.
Bob?
Have there been any discussions with DPW about sewer capacity?
We just had some informal discussions. I think is that a fair assessment, informal?
Yeah.
Is there any leanings one way or another?
No, I think they've got to probably work through the Board of Selectmen to come back up and come back up to you. Because I think there's a lot of items at play in terms of what the capacity is. So let me go back to the board. Is the thinking that we'll leave everything just the way it is?
Yes.
I think so, on the current, what we've proposed for the current boundary
Yeah, I
and
think that's the way we do
the
it.
zoning.
Okay.
I agree.
And then, I guess if we have to amend it, we can
Do
amend it down.
Yep, yep.
So I motion that we,
Do all that?
yeah, we go forward and we approve the current boundary. We already have voted on the boundary, but we continue that, and that we authorize Laura to put the ad in the Mariner tomorrow, and we move forward with the 40R district.
That's good. I got a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
What I like is
all of
that
you,
this
all involved.
into it. I want that thing. Okay?
No, I just understand that, yes, they're new buildings, but all is old, but
Right.
it makes this area attractive
Right.
to development. It's not your first year.
Given the process.
We played this game before.
Yes, I have, but I'm always afraid it won't make any sense.
Oh, you make a lot of sense. It's simple, it's easy, it's
Bill's kind of trying to come to do both sides, and you can't. You have to stand up for what you want to believe.
Well, that's what I was thinking. And then, even though we want to, then we get the funds.
But the other thing too is we play with the sewer capacity. You know that, and so do I. And Harris does not want this.
Yeah, but they're doing it on site. That's on site.
Oh, yeah, 'cause there's no sewer there.
However, they are going to tap into town water, so think about that.
Guys, I wanted to see you.
Well, they get set up. I actually did, I know one of the selectmen in Lunenburg, and I emailed them yesterday asking about their experience with 40R. I haven't heard anything back. Hopefully, I'll have something to read.
I think you're at that table. I think you're at
Matt, the presentation you gave today on PowerPoint, does Laura have a copy? Or can
Thank you for coming, I appreciate it.
Oh, that'd be great. And she can, I like how you did the districts and the differences.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you so much. It was nice, very nice talking to you.
Good questions.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Yet again.
Much appreciated.
Take care.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an informal presentation and discussion of Bartlett Field's development on Booth Hill Road. I feel like I was just here. Adam, I thank you for allowing us to continue over before you start. I'll make up, you can have the time on the end.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here. There's no good way of doing this, I'm sorry.
Can we pick that up on the TV?
I don't know.
I think usually it has to be over by this. No, I don't think they can see the map on the TV. I think you have to put it in front of the credenza there.
Yeah.
Can cable pick up the map?
Yeah.
You got it? Okay, good.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, well, while they're setting up,
Push over, you can do
Yeah.
that.
let me make a general comment. What this meeting tonight is the same as this in Concom last night. It basically is an informational meeting, it's a presentation, is the general idea of what they're proposing and some of the thoughts and sizing in terms, and land use that they're currently proposing. There's no application in front of any board in town, and what we're currently doing is just having a discussion. So having said that, what I do is I'd ask Adam and Jack and Steve, I guess it is, to come back up and present what they're proposing to do. I would also ask that they talked about the land purchase, or the land swap, however you want to call that, and to do that. So if you do that, and then at that point, we'll ask questions from the board, and then we'll open up and have questions from the public.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Brodsky. I'm an environmental and land use attorney with Drowan, Tacho, and Morgan. I'm working with Jack Livingston from the Livingston Companies to my left, and Steve Callahan from Global Development Properties. Jack and Steve have a joint venture to develop an approximately 24-acre undeveloped parcel of land off of Booth Hill Road. You're likely familiar with Jack. Jack developed the Whipton Pines 40B project. This is a comprehensive permit project under Chapter 40B, and the selectmen have asked us to consult with this board as well as the Conservation Commission simply to provide present our conceptual plan for informational purposes. As Mr. Limbacher said, there's no application pending before any of the boards in town. We met with the Conservation Commission last night and made a similar presentation. We're intending on having a public information session sometime in February. We have to set that date, and we will certainly reach out to the community and let them know about the public informational session. What we're talking about tonight is simply a conceptual design. We do not have design plans. This is an idea of what the project could be. And we had presented this concept to Mass Housing several weeks ago. They were very receptive to the concept, and so we've been asked, again, on an informational basis, to present it to the planning board. You all are very familiar with the 40B permitting process, but perhaps there's some people in the audience who are not. Well, the next step in the process is to file an application for eligibility with Mass Housing. We've actually begun preparing that application and expect that application to be filed within the next several weeks. During the review of that application at Mass Housing, the town will be invited to provide comments on the application. So this board, as well as all of the town boards, will have the opportunity to comment on that. Mass Housing, we expect, would then issue a letter of eligibility saying that the project is eligible for consideration under the Chapter 40B program. And it's only after we receive that letter of eligibility will we come back to the town with a formal application for a comprehensive permit that is submitted for consideration by the Zoning Board of Appeals. We expect, obviously, the planning board to be participating in the process, commenting, just so that the public knows it's going to be the Zoning Board of Appeals which will consider the comprehensive permit application. There will be public hearings, I imagine numerous public hearings regarding this in front of the ZBA. The public will have an ample opportunity to weigh in on the project. We look forward to the public's input on that. We do have wetlands on this site. The wetlands have already been delineated and set with an order of resource area delineation in ORAD that was done in 2013. So that delineation is good for 3 years. Because we have wetlands on the site, we will also have to go in front of the Conservation Commission for review of the project under the State Wetlands Protection Act. And if I might, let me help orient everyone, help describe what we're proposing. So this parcel of land is located off of Booth Hill Road, and I don't know if everyone can see. Booth Hill Road is located here. This is the Merritt Woods condominium development on Route 3A, Chief Justice Cushing Highway. In fact, you can see Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Route 3A over here. This is a parcel of land that's owned by the town. It is not the town forest. It's actually part of the property acquired and part of the Ellis Estate. It's acquired for school use, conservation use, and other uses. But it's not the town forest, and I think there's some misconception when we talk about this project that there's going to be some impact on the town forest. The town forest is actually down here, and then actually down here you have the Whitcomb Pines development. And as I mentioned, it's an approximately 24-acre parcel of land. Access is going to be proposed over, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Access is proposed from Booth Hill Road. This is what's called a double-barreled entranceway. We have two 16-foot wide travel lanes with a 4-foot median. And it's designed this way so if you needed to, you could actually have essentially 4 cars across. And this is done for the provision of emergency services. So if, for example, one of the entrance lanes is blocked, then an emergency vehicle could go through the other way. I mentioned that there are wetlands on the property, and you can see, it's difficult to see, but there's a wetland system here that wraps around here, and there's a small wetland system down here. In order to construct the proposed drive from Booth Hill Road, we would need to cross the wetlands in 2 locations. And what we proposed is to, in this location, fill wetlands, approximately 2,490 square feet of wetlands filled here. In this location, because there is a stream within that wetland system, we're proposing a culvert that would comply with the stream crossing standards. It's essentially a bridge. It maintains the natural stream bed, and there'd be some slight filling on either side of that, approximately 1,800 square feet. It's less than 5,000 square feet of bordering vegetated wetland alteration, which is permissible under the State Wetlands Protection Act. Theoretically, you could fill more than that under what's known as a limited project. A limited project is where you have a substantial area of uplands. You're allowed to access the uplands by crossing the wetlands. In this instance, this actually complies with the State Wetlands Protection Act. We don't need to call it a limited project, but it's essentially a limited project. This entranceway is going to be, it's about approximately 900 feet long. And then the entranceway circles around this way. The only area of wetlands alteration is for the entrance drive. The rest of the project is going to be set back at least 50 feet from this wetland system and this wetland system here. We're proposing 8 buildings. This site has the capacity for 252 units total. However, the total number of units will be dependent upon finalizing the design of the septic system. This will be a wastewater treatment system with a soil absorption system, essentially a large leaching field. We've done extensive test pits out there. We need to do more, but the total number of units will ultimately depend upon the septic capacity, and we need to maintain it's less than 40,000 gallons per day for the system. So we estimate that the total number of units anywhere between 220 some odd units up to 252 units, but that number hasn't been determined yet. It's going to be based upon our additional investigations. As I mentioned, 8 units. These are going to be rental units. And I just want to be clear, I misspoke last evening. I was asked during the question period, what's the percentage of all of the units that are going to be affordable? So this is a comprehensive permit project. Only a percentage of them are affordable units. We quickly cobbled together, it was late at night, and I mentioned that it's a 10% requirement. This is a rental project as opposed to an owner-occupied project. It's actually 25% of the total number of units will be affordable units. 75% of the units will be market rate units. We're proposing 2 types of buildings. There'll be a 36-unit building and a 24-unit building, and these are 3-story buildings. So if people were envisioning skyscrapers in the West End, that's not the case. These are 3-story buildings, and in fact, again, we haven't done the architectural work. This is a conceptual design, but this is a concept of what the buildings would look like. Again, an architectural style in keeping with Scituate. We are going to have a proposed clubhouse and pool to provide amenities for the tenants in the development. Obviously, we need parking. We're proposing at this point 378 parking spaces. There are going to be 15 garages to get some of the cars out of the weather. That results in a parking rate of 1.7 spaces per unit, which is more than typical for a development of this time. Obviously, this project needs to comply with the Massachusetts stormwater standards, so we will have an extensive stormwater management system. Just for, again, for conceptual purposes, and this design is going to change. We've located stormwater basins, these green lines here, 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 and here, just to show on a plan what types of things that we would expect. Importantly, we understand the sensitivities of the neighborhood, and so this is designed to maintain an extensive vegetated buffer from all of the neighborhoods. This site is heavily wooded. There's no question that we're going to need to remove a substantial number of trees in order to do this project. But this concept is designed to maintain the natural buffer, screening this project from the neighborhood. Obviously, we're very concerned about traffic on Booth Hill Road. We asked ourselves the very same questions that some of the neighbors asked last evening. Well, how are you going to do traffic here? Is this going to be safe? And so, we've reached out, and as you can appreciate, there's a significant amount of time and effort to come up with these concept plans to begin the process of submitting to Mass Housing. And so Jack and Steve needed to assure themselves that Booth Hill Road would be an appropriate way to access the project. They've consulted with a traffic engineer who's done a preliminary study, and the traffic engineer has confirmed that based upon the information available, that the site distances on Booth Hill Road are appropriate. We're not going to compromise existing traffic, and we're not going to impact the level of service at the intersection of Booth Hill Road and 3A. There were a number of questions last night about Route 3A and whether we need a traffic light. We just wanted to point out that we have no control over a traffic light on Route 3A. Neither does the town. That's a state highway. Ultimately, it's Mass Highway that will determine whether that intersection needs to be improved. We very well may need to do some improvements on Booth Hill Road. We don't know what those are, whether it's pruning trees or whatnot. As part of the comprehensive permit application, we will be conducting an extensive traffic study. All of that information obviously will be presented to the town through the ZBA. We assume that the town will hire its own traffic consultants to peer review that. We understand the concerns of the neighborhood on Booth Hill Road. We've also designed this to comply with the 40B design guidelines and ultimately expect Mass Housing to issue a letter of eligibility for the project. Mr. Limbacher has made mention of the proposed land swap. You may recall at fall town meeting, there was an article proposed for us to essentially acquire a portion of the town property, not the town forest, the town property that's a portion of the Ellis estate, in order to, as an alternative to Booth Hill Road, access this project over that portion of the property directly to Route 3A. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. The Board of Selectmen at that time approved an article to present at town meeting, but when it became apparent that we needed to do more work to educate the public regarding what we're proposing and what this land swap was, the Board of Selectmen appropriately said, listen, let's just take this off, we'll table this for full town meeting and revisit the issue once you've come forward and brought some additional information to bear. So, more specifically, and this may look familiar, it's a little worn out since we've tried this around town before. Just to orient everyone, and this gives you a better sense of where this property is. Route 3A, Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Booth Hill Road, Clapp Road is down here. This is Manlot Road. So here is the town property we're talking about. It's identified here as the Ellis property. Here's the town forest right here. Whitcomb Pines, I mentioned, Jack's other 40B project is here. And this is the project site. This is, you can see here, these are the condominiums for Merritt Woods. And so the idea is in lieu of accessing the project from Booth Hill Road, constructing that 800-foot or 900-foot long passageway, in lieu of the wetlands crossings, that if we could acquire approximately 1 acres of this town property with frontage on Chief Justice Cushing Highway, we could eliminate all of this impact. This area would be maintained in a natural state. We wouldn't be altering wetlands. We wouldn't be bothering the folks on Booth Hill Road. And we could build our double-barrel entranceway here. It was, the idea was to move this as far away from, Merritt Woods as possible. So on this conceptual plan, we've shifted this driveway essentially to the, I guess that would be the southern side of the parcel. This shows a distance of approximately 320 feet away from the closest residence at Merritt Woods. Because this is town-owned property used for conservation and recreational purposes, we're actually required to provide compensation to the town, an equivalent piece of property. We went to the selectmen last fall and made a proposal to the selectmen, and the selectmen said, no dice. If you want us to do this, you've got to come back with, I think the term was something of significant benefit to the town. And so we went back. This property is owned by a realty trust controlled by Jack. There's another parcel of land also owned by the same trust. It's 16 acres, approximately 16 acres, located in green on this plan. It has access over Clapp Road. Just to orient you, it's next to 3 town parcels here. That's the cemetery of that part of town right there. These These parcels with the crosshatch, these are actually owned by Whitcomb Pines LLC, the developer of the Whitcomb Pines. These are subject to conservation restrictions. That was part of the permit of Whitcomb Pines, so they're to be restricted for conservation or recreation use. But candidly, this was going to be another project in the future. There are some wetlands on a portion of the property. A significant portion are uplands, including access to Clap Road. And so because the selectmen wanted a significant public benefit, we offered to the selectmen in exchange for 1 acres of town forest to give them 16 acres of developable land, essentially another project to the town. The selectmen would have control over what is done about that. There was some discussion regarding ball fields. That's a decision for the selectmen as to how that property will be used. But as compensation for that 1.8 acres, we're offering 16 acres. In addition, as I mentioned, we have these 2 parcels. They're approximately 11 acres, owned by Whitcomb Pines LLC, but subject to a conservation restriction in favor of the town. We also offered as part of this land swap to actually deed these properties over to the town. Now, it's subject to a conservation restriction, presently can't be developed anyway. However, if the town has ownership and control over the property, theoretically, in the future, if the town wanted to do something differently with those properties, they could consider modifying the terms of restriction. You know, I don't know whether they want to use portions of those properties for ball fields. I don't know whether, this property would be used for public drinking water supply. But at least the town would have the option to do something with the additional 11 acres. Total of 27 acres of land offered in exchange for the 1.8 acres. I think that's as quick a summary as I can do of a rather complicated project. Obviously, we recognize that this is, I think it's the largest project proposed for Scituate. We're very sensitive to doing that. Jack and Steve have been working on this for many months, if not years. They have reached out to people ahead of time. We're here obviously tonight at the suggestion of the selectmen. It was a very good suggestion for us to come in and preview this. We have no obligation to do that. We could have submitted our application to Mass Housing, and then the town would have been notified of the existence of the project. So we're here willing to listen. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a public informational session in February. It's either going to be Saturday, February 14th, or the following Saturday, the 21st, where we'll make a similar presentation and invite public comments. So we're happy to answer any questions the board may have, and how you will do whatever you wish to do to proceed.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll have questions from the board, and then we'll open it up to the public. We'll start with Bob. I'll start with Bob.
Well, I can't see it all that well, but that was one of the concerns, was that it wasn't the town forest, it's that little corner of the Ellis Estate that's on the other side of 3A.
That's correct. We're not proposing to do anything with respect to the town forest. I don't know how that rumor arose, but this is a separate parcel.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I knew generally where the land was, and I knew where the town forest was, and I was unaware of that little chunk of the Ellis Estate over there. And
so just to be clear, I mean, it's a larger triangular parcel. We'll have to subdivide it and create that 1 acre parcel here. And just, I don't know whether it matters or not, because this is public property held for conservation purposes, it's subject to Article 97. So if this is approved at town meeting, we actually have to go to the state legislature to get that approved also. We don't anticipate that being a problem, but I just wanted the board to be aware of that also.
No, I appreciate the clarification and all the information about the project. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're right, this project, or some part of it, has been in the works for maybe 10 years? Yeah, 10 years. So I understand what you're trying to do. The Ellis property, maybe Sean, Mr. Harris, you can answer. Does the school committee own that? No? The town?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Because that was,
That was a question Tricia had, we looked into it.
okay, because that was a big question.
I think it may, I think it may be that it's owned by the town and the care and custody of the Conservation Commission under 8C, but it's owned by the town.
Okay.
I think it's 8C.
8C, all right. Okay. What is the access to the land swap from Clap Road? What is the width of that? And is it a wetlands crossing?
Jack, you probably know the width, there are no wetlands here.
It's approximately 50 feet wide, and there are no wetlands to be crossed to enter Clap Road.
And where on Clap Road? Is it near that horrible corner?
No,
That intersection that's deadly?
no, it's on a straightaway, and
John?
It's between Teddy Coyle's house and Joe McClellan's house, if you know where that is. It's a cemetery, I wasn't sure myself.
Right.
But if you drive up there, you'll see some small...
Merritt Cemetery.
Right, you can see here, this is the, it's called
Merritt.
the Merritt Cemetery right here on the neighboring parcel.
Okay, thank you.
Just in terms of the development itself, what's the target sort of mix of units in there? And what kind of, sort of, what kind of market are you trying to hit here?
Sure.
I mean, you say you got 25% that's affordable, but what's the other 75%?
Well, we don't have a bedroom count. Obviously, it'll be a mix of 1, 2s, and some 3 bedrooms. Candidly, we would prefer 1 and 2 bedrooms. Because this is a 40B project, the state does have a policy that's trying to encourage larger units. We envision this as a high-end rental product similar to Avalon, geared towards younger adults, small families, and older citizens of Scituate who want to downsize from their 4-bedroom homes, want to stay in the area. This is entirely consistent with the Economic Development Committee's recently published study. You may recall that EDC retained consultants to perform an economic development study. They project a need for additional housing in Scituate, particularly rental housing and rental housing geared towards young adults. As I said, smaller families and older residents. I certainly know empty nesters who are thinking about moving out of their homes, who want to stay in the community, who don't want to own a house any longer. This would provide an opportunity. And similarly, young adults kids coming out of college, first jobs, they don't have the ability to buy a 3 or 4 bedroom house in Scituate with property values as they are. This provides an opportunity for them to rent in Scituate. So that's the target market for this.
Well, knowing how my daughter came out of school, I doubt she can afford high-end apartments either. In terms of other infrastructure, so you're going to do on-site sewering, basically?
Yes, sir.
And that's going to be the responsibility of the homeowners association?
Correct.
And then what about other infrastructure, water? Is gas coming into this too, or how is this?
Well, obviously, it will be town water. I don't know about gas. Gas also.
And does this need more than one means of access egress, sort of on for the access road?
Sure. So again, that will be reviewed for fire safety purposes. That's where we're proposing the double wide. I mean, it's an access way. It's a boulevard. It's designed specifically to facilitate emergency access in and out of.
So you would do that in the other parcel as well?
Yes, again, the same concept, it's very difficult to see on this plan. It's the same concept, would be a double-barreled entranceway here.
And are there special requirements for actually sort of a curb cut access to 3A?
Of course, we need to go through the permitting process with Mass Highway in order to be able to do that. And that would certainly be part
Are
of the
there any
permitting process.
limitations about distance to intersections and that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, there are the federal and the state standards, we'd have to comply with all of those standards. Having said that, we have looked at those issues. I mean, again, the site distances are very good here. We don't anticipate any problems, but we're going to have to develop all of that information, contained in a traffic study, and as part of this, obviously, approach Mass Highway and get permission to be able to do that.
But the access way meets those particular standards now?
Based upon the information we have, yes. Yes. Based upon our preliminary traffic study and the evaluation by our traffic engineer. I mean, contrary to public perception, I believe Mass Highway does not think of 3A as a heavily traveled roadway.
Yeah, it's because they don't drive it much.
That's true, but I mean, it's based on, car counts and things like that, so they may have a different perception of this than do we. But what we're proposing, based upon the information we have, meets standards.
Right, but you'll end up, you said you had 300 and some odd parking spaces, right?
Correct.
Right, so that's sort of choke point, sort of dumping cars into 3A.
Well, we're going to have to evaluate it. I mean, they may require that we have, turnout lanes, turn-in lanes, so there may be some modifications that would be needed to accommodate that. We're cognizant of the fact that we have it's no longer the proposed, I guess the public safety complex will be built here. That will all have to be evaluated and designed to meet standards. It's just simply too early in the process to dig down into those issues.
And is there a notion of sort of preserving open space here or
Yes.
accessing open space?
Yes, I didn't mention this, but there's an extensive series of trails through those parcels that are subject to conservation restriction, trails in town forest. When we designed the landscaping plan, the idea is to connect to those existing public trails as a public amenity. And again, the beauty of the land swap, at least from the town's perspective, you've got the Ellis property here, owned by the town forest, they'd own this property, they'd own this property, they'd own this property. Essentially, you've got a continuous corridor of town-owned and controlled property from 3A to Clap Road. Simply from, controlling that as habitat, you're creating a habitat corridor, but it's also a recreational corridor that connects all of those separate pieces. And so this would facilitate building out that network, and that would be a public amenity.
And that just reminds me, is there any habitat issues on the proposed development parcel?
No, this is not estimated or priority habitat regulated under the Natural Heritage Program. The only wetland resources are those border vegetated wetlands, which we discussed. Again, from an environmental point of view, if the land swap is ultimately approved by the selectmen and approved at town meeting, it would eliminate all of the alteration proposed off of Booth Hill Road. So all of this goes away, and so we have an additional 3 or 4 or 5 acres, a substantial area that would remain in its natural state.
Be undeveloped?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Concerning, I know it's very conceptual, but right now with the proposed plan, would the building shift if the land swap were to occur? Or roughly would it come in where between the top right building and the lower right, kind of like where the clubhouse.
Of course, I mean, that may be a possibility, that there would be some changes in the location of the buildings.
And you mentioned Avalon and Cohasset, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw it too. Do you know what their breakdown is as far as like, or even number of units compared to this? I mean, how does the two developments compare?
240, Avalon's 240 units.
So it's pretty similar.
Yes.
And then, so.
Mix of rooms?
First, 1, 2 bedrooms, do you know?
I don't know the mix, no.
So again, our preference would be 1 and 2 bedrooms with fewer 3 bedrooms, but that's a discussion with Mass Housing, which has a specific policy regarding the number of 3 bedrooms that we'll be looking for here.
But I guess you could even kind of judge the volume on 3A based on the Cohasset development, basically, and how they've handled the turning and so forth.
Yes. That certainly would be an example a traffic engineer could look to.
Just don't take a left.
Yeah, just don't stop on 3A. Take a left.
Don't take a left coming out of there. You up and turn around.
Or don't try to pull in there, taking a left across traffic.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions right now.
Advantage to going last, everything's already been talked about. You're going to be subject to Mass DEP and Scituate Conservation Commission sort of regulations and standards. Mass Highway is going to oversee the 3A intersection if that comes to pass. Booth Hill Road will be, you'll have your own traffic engineer in either case on the project, but that study and its conclusions will be overviewed and recommended upon by the town's traffic engineer, presumably?
Oh, I guaranteed of that.
Okay.
I haven't been on the ZBA for at least part of my life. They go through it probably as thorough or maybe more thorough than we do with subdivisions.
Good. And what about, that brings up kind of my question, but what about other standards of development and design? I know that 40B exempts you from many, if not all, of the zoning regulations of the town. Kind of review what that process of oversight and input and regulatory activity is from your point of view. I've never been through a 40B project from beginning to end, and so probably don't know as much as I ought to about the process.
No, and you're correct. I mean, this project would not be allowed under current zoning, but because this is a comprehensive permit project, we don't have to comply with local zoning, although the zoning board will provide us with guidelines as to what they'd like to see here. Similarly, the project is subject to all of the state environmental controls, may not be subject to the Scituate local bylaw. We would have to present a list of waivers to the zoning board of appeals. The zoning board of appeals would have the ability to waive those requirements. Having said that, this has been designed to comply with the town's local wetland bylaw, which restricts, development within 50 feet of the wetlands. Under the state act, you can actually do work up to a wetland. The local bylaws more stringent. So we're already thinking ahead as to the things that the town would want us to do with this project. Subject to the extent that we trigger any thresholds in the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, we'd have to comply with those requirements. I mentioned stormwater design. The Massachusetts stormwater standards are incorporated into the State Wetlands Protection Act, so we need to meet those standards. The town has adopted a local stormwater bylaw designed to kind of fill in the gaps. The state stormwater standards are geared to larger projects, so smaller projects are exempt. When the town decided that they want to regulate those smaller projects, they adopted a local stormwater bylaw, but they use the same standards. So again, we are going to have to comply with the very same standards. I mean, Jack and Steve are local guys. They're not a large national developer coming in here, thumbing their nose at, local sensitivities and local requirements. So already at this conceptual stage, we're thinking about what the town, is interested in, and we're very sensitive to that. But as part of the ZBA process, to the extent that we're going to need waivers from local requirements, we'll be providing a list of those waivers for the ZBA to consider. I'm suggesting that we're being very sensitive and very careful from the outset as to what the town is going to expect from us.
One other question that has to do with the sort of proposed land swap. What's the approximate acreage of the upland portion of that area off of Clap Road?
We do have a wetland delineation of that. I didn't bring that this evening. I want to say that
10 of the 16.
Two-thirds of it are uplands, a third wetlands.
Out of the 16, it's close to 10 upland and 6
10
wet.
acres. And again,
And it's all at the back.
right, so you might recall there's a beginning of that little wetland system at the bottom of the project site. That continues across over here and then ends. This is all developable uplands. So the majority of that site are uplands.
And that's in a nice sort of chunk that's contiguous to itself and that sort of thing.
Yes, and contiguous to other town parcels.
Thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, I had a couple things. Some of the other comprehensive permit applications, Whitcomb Pines was one, Herringbrook Meadow was another one. They actually went before the design review committee. The zoning board can sort of delegate their design process to that committee besides just the planning board using them. And I wondered if there had been any thought about involving them with a project, this big and this significant to the town.
We haven't considered, but we're certainly open for discussion with the town as to how they want to review this. You may be, I don't know if you've reviewed the new 40B application for Mass Housing and the new 40B design guidelines. I mean, Mass Housing is also sort of looking into design elements as part of the letter of eligibility review. It's interesting. So Mass Housing has already been looking at this for probably many of the same things that design review would, but we would certainly consider that.
Well, I think the design review committee for Scituate is going to look at, the local compatibility with, with the town and that sort of thing.
Oh, I understood, but I mean, the new design guidelines for 40Bs, it's very interesting. I mean, architectural elements, things like that. And they are sort of...
Are those sort of a guideline, but they don't like sit there and review the project relative to those?
No. Again, we're certainly open for discussions with the town, how the town wishes to review this.
Another question I had, just out of curiosity and also thinking about the subsidized housing inventory and things like that, and also the overall housing market in Scituate, is this project going to be phased? How would the build-out go?
Sure. And Mr. Limbacher asked the question last evening, construction sequencing, and I think my answer was inadequate last night. I think you were concerned with sort of infrastructure. The contemplation would be is that we'd have to put in all of the infrastructure right off the bat. Probably the buildings would be phased in. Obviously, we need to present all of that information as part of the application, the construction sequence, the phasing. Obviously, Scituate is below its required 10% affordable housing inventory. This is a large project. At least from an affordable housing point of view, even though 25% of the units are required to be affordable, all of the units would count towards your housing inventory. This project's not going to get the town to 10%, but it's going to make a significant difference and get you much closer to the 10%. So again, that's another advantage of a rental project as opposed to an owner-occupied project.
have you done any kind of analysis relative to how much water is going to be consumed relative to what the town's capacity is, or?
No, that's part of what we're going to have to do to submit our application for the comprehensive permit. So again, we have a lot to do now. We're presenting a concept because we don't know where our access is going to be, and it's so difficult then to go into the next stage of design until we know whether we're going to be on Booth Hill Road or alternatively on 3A.
But that's a concern that I have, just to pick up on Laura's. One is where's going to be your source point? Is it going to be looped, and is there going to be an adequate amount of pressure? Because
those are all good questions that we're going to have to address in the design phase. This property is not in the water resource protection.
They may need a couple of pumps.
Yeah, this property is not in the water resource protection district. We have no tributaries to public water supplies. I mean, so we're not dealing with those sensitivities, but we're obviously going to have to address the utility issue.
Yeah, you will have to sprinkler those buildings, so that's an additional requirement on pressure and volume of water.
Any questions from the board before we open it up?
I have one more question. The septic system, such as it will be, and whatever detention, stormwater, et cetera, mention was made that the homeowners association would deal with that. There won't be a homeowners association.
That's correct. I misspoke. You're absolutely right.
There will be, you will be hiring a maintenance or a project manager?
Sure. The owner of the development presumably would hire a maintenance company or do it in-house. I don't know how that would be handled, but you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Just one more question that sort of brings up, would these remain apartments for the foreseeable future, or is there an ability to convert these to condos, or what?
They're being proposed and permitted as apartments.
But there's nothing that in your application with mass housing that requires them to remain that way?
That's how you have to present it. You have to present all of your financial information supporting the application. It's a entirely different application for rental versus owner-occupied units.
Yeah, I'm just asking, if you permit them as rental, is there a barrier to convert?
Them? I don't know the answer under the 40B regs.
We have no intention. I don't think you can, because you're committing to the rental program and all the rental guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen it done.
Okay.
One last comment that I thought of when people were talking is that, again, compared to Avalon over in Cohasset, and I think they actually have a shuttle that goes to the Cohasset train station or something. So in that regard, I mean, are you looking at like bike racks? It's a little bit far to walk to North Scituate Station, but some other types of transit-friendly, or where there wouldn't be as many car...
Sure. We candidly hadn't gotten to that level of detail. That's certainly a legitimate question and a legitimate concern that we'd have to address. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we're near Greenbush line. We want to maximize our ability to get vehicles off the road and get people to the train station.
I believe it's 1 mile to the North Scituate train station.
Okay.
Monorail, maybe?
No.
I think you make it pretty quick once you see the cars coming, turning across the road.
To my knowledge, there's no sidewalk on Booth Hill Road, right?
There are no sidewalks.
No sidewalks.
There's sidewalks on Manlock, Booth Hill,
Sidewalks on 3A.
3A.
Well, I know, yeah. So you're taking your life in your hands if you're walking there to North Scituate Station.
Actually,
And again, I mean, we consider all of that in the traffic study. As I mentioned, there may need to be some improvements to Booth Hill that might satisfy some of your concerns.
as far as Manlock.
So let's open up to the public. What I need is your name, your address, and try to be as specific as you can. To say that it's big, ugly, and I don't like it doesn't really help me out, doesn't help the applicant out. So, Dr. Price.
Gordon Price, 48 Manlock Road. The comment was a question, I guess. I would hope the developer owners would be a little bit more sensitive to the environmental impact of a project like this. When I drive by what's the project to the right? I forget the name now.
Wickham
Wickham Pines?
It was clear cut. You know, I would not like to see that yellow look like Whitman Pines looks. So I would hope there would be some sensitivity to leaving some tall trees in there rather than kind of clear cutting it. I would hope that they would just.
No, sir, and just so everyone knows, this is an older Google Maps layer beneath this. So I think this, and our engineer generated this, this is a very old image when Whitcomb Ponds was under construction. If you've driven through there, they're finishing up the final phase. And so the final landscaping will look very different than what you see here. But the answer is yes. I mean, there's no question that there's going to have to be a substantial number of trees removed. But we're going to have to develop a plan to, preserve the buffer and to maintain as much green space. Again, one of the advantages of doing the land swap is we can, preserve this whole area without crossing those wetlands and altering any of this area. But we're very sensitive to that, Doctor.
If there was very little natural vegetation left on that site when it was developed. I guess my other question, if it's appropriate or not, but Adam maybe touched on it briefly, but how was the decision arrived at to go with tenant-based housing rather than owner-occupied? Is it just a financial decision, or is it a...
Well, I certainly can have Steve and Jack talk about it. That's the market. We understand that the market presently is for rental and not more condominiums. That's also was the conclusion of the town's EDC study. The big need is rental in Scituate and, not more condominiums.
Thank you.
Sir?
Mike Corcoran, 5 Trudy's Lane. What is the address on Booth Hill of that entrance? Approximately.
You should know this now. Jack?
It's between 127 and 133.
Is that where the guardrail is?
No.
Right down from it.
Towards 3A.
You know the blue house, the blue house is on the left? It's the next house is 127.
Okay.
And then it's...
Okay.
You know who lives in that house, Sean?
Maybe Michael Loring or David Smith, someone. I'm not exactly sure.
I should mention that Jack owns the house right here on this side of the entrance.
Sir?
Joe Sugar, 127 Booth Hill Road, so I'm
Here, I'll sit
actually
down.
on the other side. The dark green parcel in the land swap, what is the development potential of that parcel that you are giving up? I know, Mr. Livingston, you must have looked at it.
Conceptually?
What could you put there?
Jack?
Well, we could go with another Chapter 40B project, and as of right now, we have perk tests adequate for at least 90 bedrooms. And we could probably expand on that.
But you'd be giving that up if you went to 3A?
Yes.
Right.
Sir?
John Lodford, Merritt Woods. If you do not get approval for access to 3A, how close does that access road from Booth Hill cut over onto Merritt Woods property there? Looks like it's very, very close.
No, sir. So first of all, we can't go on Merritt Woods property. We can
No, I
stay
mean,
on
how
our
close
property.
is it to Merritt Woods?
You have to understand that this is a very...
It's not to scale.
Well, this is not to scale. It's a very large parcel. So what appears to be a short distance is larger than that. The closest building would be here. I don't even...
Probably see them better here, yeah. See, this is Merritt
There's a scale on that drawing.
So, there was this, help.
Yes.
This is Merritt Woods right through here?
Correct.
Yes.
So this would be the property line of the large parcel. I'm not sure if you were asking about over here, this piece,
over here,
or the distance to structures.
I'm asking regarding the access to Booth Hill Road.
So this way.
From Booth Hill Road. It circles around close to the Merritt Woods line.
Right here.
How close? Just approximately.
And I don't have a scale, more than 100 feet, 200 feet.
There's a scale at the bottom of that map.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm a little bit dubious about using it.
We
Well, that's
had
not
the
good.
engineer just for
Presented as fact.
We had in scale, this is 320.
Close, yes, I know where the parcel is.
We were asking the same, if someone said, what's the closest unit from Merritt to the proposed road? That's 320 feet right there.
Right.
That helps.
The other two backyards are very close to that.
Yes, sir.
Right
Drawn
there.
back right here.
Yeah.
So the Booth Hill entrance is closer to Merit Structures
Oh,
than
absolutely.
the 3A?
Correct.
Absolutely. In other words, if you do get if you do have to use Booth Hill Road access, that circle there
Yes, sir.
is eliminated.
Correct. Correct. And again, we far prefer accessing the property from 3A.
The only thing I'll point out is, entrance and any of those roads is relatively easy. Outgoing traffic is very difficult. They're all, I mean, the traffic going both ways, and so if you really haven't looked at it closely, I can tell you that 3A, especially during morning hours from 7 until 10, mostly throughout the day, and certainly in the afternoon, starting at 3 and going until 6 o'clock at night, you wait quite a while to get out onto 3A. And Merritt Woods is 16 units.
Yes, sir. No, we...
Talking about over 200 units going out into 3A. That's going to be a different story, I think, in terms of traffic flow.
Yes, sir.
Like I said, you can make a cutoff to get in. Not so easy getting out.
We recognize that there will be traffic impacts associated with this project, which will have to be carefully evaluated and addressed.
May I just follow up on that point? What possibility do you think that there is getting a stoplight put in there from Massachusetts Highway Department?
Something less than zero?
We're not opposed to that, I can tell you that. But in asking, in the preliminary review from he said he didn't think it would happen. They go by traffic counts, car count per day, and in their world, that's not heavily
Fatalities
people
build up.
die, yeah.
issue from what you're
A couple more
saying.
people would die.
It's a completely different reality. I mean, they're not there.
There is some, he did say a couple things that made some sense to me, that he thought would help slow the traffic down. We were asked to spot the public safety center on the plan. That will most likely have a signal light that, that the fire department will request, and they'll get that. He thought that would help slow, that'll flash and be, controlled. And then just another entrance. Now, this is coming from the traffic engineer, it's not me. When it's heavily wooded, people feel safe and they actually drive faster, but when there's more entrances and driveways and business and buildings, they tend to slow down a little, for what it's worth. But no, we...
This guy lives in a shoebox.
Sean?
I was just going to say that Al Banger is working with Mass Highway right now on the signalization for the public safety building. I think that's going to be a little bit of a process, but he has started.
And I know that they were looking a while back for a light at Henry Turner Bailey, and that came to be naught. And that's
There's a flashing
that's
light.
the same kind of intersection, just moved out of street. Sir?
Brian Early, 120 Booth Hill Road, on the same tack here. You got the same issue with Booth Hill with the blinking light.
Yeah.
You've been here for 30 years, you got 16 people coming out of Merritt Woods.
Yep.
You try to cross 3A on Booth Hill in the morning, the afternoon, 5-minute wait sometimes, 4 or 5 minutes, and they haven't put a light there, so.
But Booth Hill also gives you the nasty little intersection if you come out and you head to the right.
Oh, yeah, there's accidents there every other week. And you start, my math says 250 units at 1.7, you're talking 425 more cars how many trips a day.
Yeah, you're right.
I really don't like the idea of that coming out on Booth Hill Road.
I'll get to you in a second, young lady over here.
Well, I was at the meeting last night, as some of you know. I live on Cindy Rooney, I live at 75 Booth Hill Road, which is the house right on the corner of Booth Hill and 3A. I am curious when you talk about your traffic studies, if there has been anyone who has looked into the number of accidents. Because as somebody just said, they are a lot, and I don't know if it has been recently, but people have died at that intersection. I'm the one who calls 911, I'm the one that's out there first on the scene and hope that I don't find anybody dead, bloody, or whatever. It is, as I said last night, not safe as it is now. To add another 300 cars there is absolutely crazy. And you know, nobody has talked about the number of accidents yet. They just talked about, you know, how safe it is. It's not safe. So is that part of a traffic study? Does somebody request those kind of
Yeah, the short answer is yes.
Yes,
And then
absolutely.
They look at the entrance and egress, and they look at the major contributing intersections, and they look at the accidents that happen there. So that's all part of the study. It gives you whether you got a C intersection or a D intersection. So they look, that's an integral part of how they look at it. Sir?
So Mike Kostek, 108 Booth Hill Road. Spoke extensively with the gentleman over here last night about my concerns about the overall project. One being a resident of Booth Hill Road and two being a tax-paying citizen of Scituate. He seems, and they seem pretty confident that this traffic study, that this preliminary traffic study that they did shows that the sight lines are clear. I would disagree, and I would basically second and third and fourth, whoever brought up the points about the amount of traffic on Booth Hill Road, and why you feel that this is a proper way to exit out onto this road. You'd mentioned a turnout because of the sightlines on 3A. You had no mention of a need for a turnout onto Booth Hill. I mean, the sightlines on Booth Hill couldn't possibly be better in the position that you're asking about than the sightlines on 3A. I have some photographs of the area with the guardrail. If you could maybe give me a better exact idea of where this sits, because quite frankly, this turn right here is a very sharp turn that there's no room for error as you go around that road. There's a telephone pole that sits right here, right around the bend. So if those sight lines were cleared, I'd love to see the report that says that's a safe egress out onto Booth Hill Road.
So, again, we're going to be coming back with a comprehensive plan set with designs for the board and the citizens to review. We're going to be presenting our traffic study. We know we need to address these issues. We're not minimizing these issues. We knew about these issues. We've considered these issues. And we've got to demonstrate that what we're doing is safe and appropriate. It's just very difficult to talk about specifics when we don't have a design final design of some of these features. So
I just have a follow-up question as well. So I referenced this last night, but there was a meeting on October 21st where these gentlemen stood in front of the committee and asked for or proposed the land swap. So in that meeting, it was stated, and Sean Harris is here today, you had stated that you couldn't possibly imagine a project of this size exiting out onto Booth Hill Road, let alone a project of significantly smaller size. So I'm wondering if we choose as a town to vote down this land swap, if you still agree with your statement that you don't deem that exit out as a safe exit.
Through the chairman, may I respond?
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. It's a cow path. Booth Hill Road is narrow and winding. And I will say this, that since we've spoke about the land swap, where it's proposed to come out onto 3A is not great. It would be better if it was a little further south, but that's going to go into the town forest. Right. Next time everyone travels south and, look, right after you pass Merritt Woods, the further south you go towards Gascony's gas station, the better it gets, but now you're getting into the town forest.
Exactly.
But it's much better than Booth Hill, without a doubt. No.
So if the land swap doesn't get approved or doesn't go to vote, then I just don't understand how these guys can sit here with a straight face and tell us that this is a viable project. I just don't see it. A project of this size.
They'll engineer it, it'll end up, and it'll be reviewed on both peer review, the town will end up hiring their engineer to come back up and review it.
Because it was stated at that meeting that the planning committee, and I would assume that would be yourself and the team that's up here, took a look at the preliminary proposal and agreed that this was a viable.
That's not happening.
No.
We haven't looked at any,
No.
this is the first time.
We've never seen it.
Because that was stated that the plan was reviewed and deemed that, because there was a land swap basically that was going to take place before anybody's actually seen an actual proposal. I mean, that somebody had to see the proposal to have a land swap get on a warrant for the town.
We've never represented that we presented this to any of the boards. We conceptually discussed things, we've never showed this Board of Selectmen what the project would look like. No, just talking about the land swap, we had many discussions with that, and then more questions rose than we had answers for. And that, like Adam said earlier, that's when, we advised them to withdraw.
We're going to have to wrap this up pretty quick, please.
I have a question for Sean, if he doesn't mind, Sean, in your opinion, what's the likelihood that the town will approve the swap, given the substantial difference?
Take a crystal ball.
So you're trading 15-plus acres for an acre and a half?
Right, that's correct.
What's the negative side to that from the town's perspective?
That if we didn't do it, if it didn't pass, could be built. Tony and I asked a question, do you need this swap? Their answer was no. So we thought, if I can continue for 1 minute, we thought it would be in the best interest of the town. We held a couple public hearings and word didn't get out. So, and then at the last minute, that's when word got out.
What would the town, what would general public's negativity be towards the swap, though? Why would people care that we would pick up 14-plus acres only to give up a piece along 3A? There seems to be a town benefit to the swap.
Because that's the way I feel. That's,
I'm not sure you can speak A for the board or
I cannot,
or even for
but-
larger for the town.
Right. And then to answer your question, Mike, it's whoever shows up at town meeting, and boy, if I can predict that.
So, but Joe Schroeder from 127 Blue Hill. But if we don't do the swap, that property in dark green is still in play to be developed as well.
Correct.
So where we stay, if we don't do the swap, where we stand is you get a 600-foot roadway versus whatever the shorter roadway is. You get more pavement, and if we don't do the swap, you get the green parcel that can also get developed, and you can also get a 40B. So I mean, obviously, I'm motivated not to go to Booth Hill Road, probably more than anybody in this room, but,
Well, I think the onus is on the citizens of the town to, if there is a proposal for the land swap, to go to town meeting and to, basically state your reasoning why and make people understand what the benefits are one way or another. Because, that's what it all comes down to, is people having the right information to make an intelligent choice. And I think if they have the information, they will make the correct choice.
I think there's also a reality, not necessarily the land swap is if you can't get in, you can't get out, people aren't going to live there.
I
We'll wrap this up in 5 minutes.
I wanted to just
Scott
say,
Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road. I got 3 basic questions. One thing in the land swap, I'm pretty familiar with the conservation stuff and some of the other aspects. Is there a value to the town that the owner would agree to meet all town bylaws? Because there are some great things that were put in the conservation stuff about where they are and are not agreeing with the things, and also would make sure that we have the most control over this, because it's very important that they be able to get onto Cushing Road. The other thing I'd like to see, traffic is a pain here. But the one thing about putting a one-shot deal back to Booth Hill Road, some of the traffic running towards Norwell, towards the Shop and Shop, will be filtered out that way if there were both entrances. Fire department might even cause you to get both entrances anyway. And what is the width of the entrance that you have right now?
Sure.
On Booth Hill Road, what is that width?
Of this?
Yeah. Because you said it was 50 feet on the other parcel. I'm guessing you're going to have to do this entrance on the other parcel to put 90 units inside there because the fire department's going to want to have 2 accesses to get into the property. So do you know what that entrance is now?
Well, this is proposed, there are 2 16-foot travel lanes with a 4-foot median, 32, 36. You want to know the total width of frontage?
Yeah, I mean, you're still gonna have to have some buffers on the sides. I don't know all the planning board requirements, but can they get that double barrel road through a 50-foot right-of-way?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's critical. If they can't get it approved, then it's
No, I mean, not this one, but the one it's 50 foot enough to get that double barrel road that they're proposing through that. I mean, you would have a better idea than I would. And I do know that when we were looking at the height at the middle school up at the Ellis Estate, we were looking at, we probably had to widen Manhunt Road from 3A all the way down to Country Way to deal with the traffic there. They may have to widen Booth Hill Road to its full width to be able to do this. I mean, so those are some things that they need to, that they might come up later. And so I don't know how much you can answer this, but.
No, well, I just want, Jack indicated that we can fit that double-barreled accessway in that area.
The one that you have.
Correct.
But on the other property, you don't know.
3 more questions and then we're done. The guy with the striped shirt.
So I have a question in regards, I asked about the size of the project. There wasn't a whole lot of specifics last night as far as the number of residents. As far as the towns or the school systems are concerned, so we just voted to approve a $75 million middle school to alleviate the overcrowding in the 4 elementary schools. The proposal that was put in place was told that this would eliminate temporary classrooms in both Cushing and Hadley, and the townspeople voted for this. This proposal right here would influx how many children into the town, how many children into which schools. Would they be sent to different schools? Would they all go to the same schools? Who would pay for the buses? There's also proposal that we talked about earlier about the 40R. So talking about additional potential 25-unit properties to be built in the town. We're talking about 70 additional homes being built in the Toll Brothers complex. And I just want to know why those were not brought up when we all voted on the middle school, because we pretty much alleviated a problem. The taxpayers are stuck with the bill, and these guys are here sitting, filling it right back up again with no benefit to the town, except for these gentlemen making and profiting off the land. So I'd just like to have somebody address those issues.
Well, I think when they have the initial public hearings, that's the time to bring that up. Because that way there you've got specifics in terms of what the numbers are, where they're going to be, what the access is, because I think that all plays into it. The one thing we do know is they won't be walkers.
Yeah. And they won't be paying taxes either.
Your young lady on the end, then.
I thought that was a great point that you brought up over here, and I'd like to ask again about the 2 entrances, because that would mean a lot about whether a land swap was even something we should give. Is there a possibility that if the land swap went through, that there would still be an entrance on Booth Hill? He did say it would be eliminated, but I'm asking again.
I'm not sure how to answer your question. This has been done on other 40B projects. We haven't presented a plan to the fire chief and got his thoughts regarding it. This is not an unusual access way for these types of
I
projects.
think
what she's asking,
the
if you
question
got
as
the
I
other
understand
access
it
road.
was.
No, I said
You
to
need
get
for
both.
emergency
What I'm
access.
suggesting is that a double barrel entranceway is an, is.
No, no, that's not what I'm asking.
No, I think the
What
question,
I'm asking is,
You want to know whether we're gonna get, you're gonna need both.
I'm asking,
I'm not making myself clear. I can't specifically answer your question because we haven't talked to the fire chief. Having said that, a single double-barrel entranceway is not atypical for these kinds of projects.
I know, but that's not what I want to know, though.
Okay.
What I want to know is, if the land swap went through, you're saying that the entrance would be out onto 3A, and that whole area of Booth Hill would be eliminated, it would remain wooded and whatever.
That would be our desire.
The point that the gentleman brought up over here is that they may require you to have 2 entrances. So is that anything that you have thought of, that you might get one out where the land swap is, and you might still have one on 3A? And if that were the case, that could be a possibility, is that something that would be brought up before anybody voted on this land swap?
We would advocate strongly for the sole entrance and exit onto 3A.
And is that something you would know would be viable before the
I wish I could predict the future. I can't know. All I can tell you is that this is what we would like to do. This is what has been done in other similar projects.
It's been done before.
That's right. We would expect this to happen. I can't tell you. And we were asked, series of questions last night with various hypotheticals. I just have no ability to meaningfully answer those kinds of questions.
okay, the black shirt, you're the...
Sure, Rick Rosone, 118 Booth Hill Road. As a follow-up, whose decision would it be as to whether or not there was a single egress or a requirement for an egress also off of Booth Hill if the land swap did go through?
CBA.
CBA.
So that's a meeting.
Wouldn't it be also the fire commissioner
Well,
too?
it would be his recommendation.
They take the input, but the ZBA would be basically a big decision. Okay, last one.
Well, from everything that I hear, I think that we're going to get an approval to cut into 3A. It looks that way to me. Booth Hill Road does not look like an acceptable alternative. Even though 3A is no walk in the park, Booth Hill Road is going to be a nightmare. And just going forward, I hope that all of us on Booth Hill Road, Manlock Road, and Merritt Woods are being advised of all of the decisions that are being made, because I can tell you, as very recent past president of the association at Merritt Woods, no one was informed about this conveyance. And I don't think anybody that I've spoken to at Booth Hill Road or at Manlock Road were ever advised about this conveyance until it was all done. I don't think that that's fair to all of the abutters.
Right.
That's correct.
I mean,
He stated in that meeting that he spoke with people from Booth Hill Road. I asked last night for who he spoke with and who this group spoke with. They were not able to provide a list of the
all right, you can't go there.
Anyway, I thank you for your time. I apologize for keeping you out so late.
All right, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming in and telling us.
Thank you. Drive safe.
Drive safe on 3A.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome.
Don't try to take a look.